It's great to have you. I'm really excited to have you on. Just reading a little bit about your blog. I haven't got around to reading your book, unfortunately. Just between Friday and Monday. That was and I'm really religious about. I've tried to take Saturday and Sunday off. I do not touch anything that is kind of work. Although my whole world of work and play is kind of a big messy mix. But I try and just it's me, time with my family, friends, nothing else. And so there was just very little chance I was going to be picking it up at like 10 o'clock at night when my wife went to bed or something. And so I was like, be fine. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions under the premise of I know very little about you. I read a little blurb on our Instagram dialogue that we had. And I was like, oh my God, I want to talk to this person. I want to get to know this person. So I'm going to presume that a lot of the people listening to this are probably in a very similar place. Do you want to maybe give a bit of that quick blurb, a bit of an overview of who is Emily? Like, who are you? How have you got to here?
Honestly, I'm still figuring that out.
Excellent.
And I think I always will be. But I like your little thing about I'm actually more interested in talking to Phil. I think I found you on Instagram and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I want to have some conversations. So I'm going to keep on hijacking the microphone and interviewing you by accident, I think.
It's awesome. This is always a bit of a conversation anyway. So I'm not into a one-sided monologue anyway.
Oh, well, that's great. Already, I just want conversation with people. And that's the person, that I am. I've come from the church and I've always wanted to have conversations with people and not just to be told what to believe, but it's just conversation is such a good word and it's really what I'm all about. So even hearing you saying about, well, actually I'm very religious about my weekend, and I'm like, yay. And immediately I want to say, so when you were, perhaps, I don't know if you're still involved with church or what you do, but I wonder if you did think Sunday is my day of rest. And that is a beautiful, sacred thing for me. Or if you were just rushed off your feet because it was a Sunday and it becomes like this busy Christian day, doesn't it? So asking like who I am. And, I think for me, it's been about coming, from this story of, being a missionary in South America, being, a Christian in an evangelical church in the UK, and not just going like, I've thrown all that away now I believe in science and blah, blah, blah. I think I always believed in science anyway, but it's this kind of journey that means like, how do I embrace as much as I can from that part of my story and use it to move forward into the next stages. And what I love, the reason that I, found you originally, I'm interested in spiral dynamics and started listening to all your episodes on that. And what I love about things like that is it helps me look back at my past and not to judge myself for the decisions that I made, and not to judge those friends that I still have from that time in my life, and to come at it, with an understanding attitude. And when I talk about, stuff like personality types and Enneagram and all of that, is this journey of trying to come to a place where I know myself more and know other and understand other people in new ways and in better ways. So I just want to be part of the conversation. Yes, I've written a book about myself. I've done some crazy things. I actually thought I've got, at some point, what I do have is this little bonkers introduction that I wrote to myself that's about 2 pages long. And that
we should read that.
Yeah, that could give you some little pointers that you could start to go, did that really happen to you? You want to expand on that? Because
absolutely, let's do it. Let's do that, because I've got to the point now where I am consistently disappointed. I don't know. There's all sorts of different words, different emotions that come up, but surprise is very rare these days for me when I'm talking to people about their faith journeys. Like at this point, I'm like, of course, that's maybe quite a unique situation, but of course that has happened to you. That does not even surprise me anymore. So I'm excited about the prospect of being surprised every now and again. It's one of my favorite things about these kind of conversations is every now and again, I'm like, what? That's a whole nother level of crazy.
I talk in my book about riding the waves of serendipity. I say serendipity is a force that can be harnessed. You can start to lean into these things, and so you can surprise doesn't surprise you anymore. It just becomes a thing. So I'm very much behind all of that. Yeah, and that's been very much. very much my life. Anyway, I'll read you these 2 pages.
Yeah, please, dive in.
As a little intro, because, yes, you've not read the bonkersness, which is my story. So started writing this book, and then I kind of thought, what the hell do I think I'm doing? I've got like no qualifications. You know, I've got a degree in English, but like, why am I writing this story? What am I doing? What do I think I have to offer? And then I kind of just wrote this as my little kind of excuse, which wasn't, oh yes, I've written lots of books and I've got a degree in theology. Didn't have any of that. But what I had was this rather bizarre list. I'm pretty sure that I do not have all the necessary qualifications needed to write a book. But I'm hoping that my array of skills and experiences will give me at least a small chance of success. I am so tall that a woman once exclaimed, "You are every child's dream," when I reached the high branch of a tree to shake down hundreds of horse chestnuts. Using only a kayak, an IKEA bag and a child's fishing net, I rescued the swans on a nearby lake no less than 5 times and was unfazed by their complete lack of gratitude. Without desiring to, I once peed publicly 3 times in the same day and have yet to develop a fear of outdoor urination. I pushed 2 large babies out of my body without requiring pain relief or a hospital. I have been charged by a wild tapir. At least 4 songs have been written about me, 1 from a mental ward, 1 as a jingle for my painting show, 1 to commemorate my midnight busking sessions in dark city centres, and 1 by a man who proposed 5 minutes after we met. I am so connected to the divine that a squirrel once fell on my head when I told God that I wanted to feel closer to nature. At the age of 19, I engaged in an hour-long battle with a demonized cat in Argentina. I once prayed so hard that my body did not stop shaking for 2 weeks. Late one evening, I figured out the meaning of life, but had forgotten it by morning. I can speak in tongues. I have cycled across the United Kingdom on a whim, taken 8 hours to ride a broken bicycle up a mountain in Chile and 20 minutes to ride down it. I've been known to ride a bike across Amsterdam while sitting on an armchair. I can mend a bicycle using nothing but shoelaces. I have inbuilt satellite navigation. I swam across the eye of a volcano with an indigenous schoolchild who I kidnapped by accident. My clothes once exploded violently in front of a church youth group when I dived off a bridge in Bolivia. I have been known to skinny dip in the dark, guided and clothed by nothing but glow stick earrings. There is video footage of me walking by a lake at night to confront a T-Rex. I invented wild swimming. I am currently surviving on foraged wild garlic. I once stung my tongue on undercooked nettles and did not stop chewing. I regularly fed 40 people in a warehouse in Buenos Aires, in a kitchen so small and so crowded that you could not bring your arms down if you entered whilst carrying a pan on your head. I insist on making my own bread whilst wild camping. When I'm bored, I use powdered beetroot to make all my meals pink. I can eat everything but olives. I was given a 4-star rating by the Scotsman newspaper for my John Cleese-inspired acting abilities. I read all the Russian authors as a child. I learnt Spanish by reading Anna Karenina. I can make my eyes look in different directions.
Wow.
I can do that. And can inhale my top lip into my nostrils. I have been seen tidying up children's toys with my feet whilst carrying a baby and folding laundry. I can translate simultaneously and at high speed from Spanish to English whilst wondering if love travels like water in the weather system. I have ridden bareback in the wilds of Patagonia to round up cattle with gauchos who hang horses' heads on hooks in sheds. I have been sighted sliding gracefully down a Chilean glacier, slowed only by a Stone Age hand tool. I can pluck a pheasant, orchestrate the creation of masterpieces by artistic novices, hold long conversations with tawny owls, and make the perfect cup of tea. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to write a book, though who knows what sort of a book it will be. That was my little intro. The lie,
Amazing.
Stop the lie in that. There is a definite lie in it.
There's a lie.
Yeah.
You can make the perfect cup of tea.
Yes! Really. You're the first person to have guessed that. I just wanted to end on something really mundane. I just wanted to just bring it up, and then just bring it down at the end. And I thought, like, just something like...
Well, I thought that was probably the hardest achievement. As I don't drink tea, but I make tea frequently for my wife. Probably not enough.
It's so hard
she would
because
say.
everyone wants it differently, and everyone's so fussy.
Yeah. Well, and I only make it for my wife, and I still can't get it right. You know, I mean, I've been doing that for years, and I still can't get her the right cup of tea. She's very chill about it. You know, she'll drink it, but we all know that she's not that impressed with my tea making abilities. So. I didn't
I'm
believe for
really
a second
glad that
you could make a perfect cup of tea.
You very much backed up your claim then of saying like, I'm pretty much unfazed by everything. So, you know that like jumping off a bridge in Bolivia and having your clothes explode and being charged by a wild tapir, all of those things, like they could happen, but making a good cup of tea, man, that's
unlikely.
Hard.
Yeah.
Hey, a lot of Americans watch your listen to your podcast, right? It's, I've heard that Americans like make a cup of tea in the microwave.
Americans make a cup of tea in a whole host of ways. They don't even have kettles, most of them. So
it's
most
their
Americans,
voltage is different.
they'll boil water on the stove, you know, so no wonder you turn to the microwave. Yeah, I would go to a microwave if I had to boil water on the stove every time.
It's really sad.
A lot of work.
It's really sad.
Well, I don't drink tea or coffee, so I don't care.
You scarred early on by an American making you a cup of tea in a microwave and then just couldn't go back.
I have no idea, yeah. I mean, Americans have scarred me in many ways, so...
Can I ask about your accent? Like, you know, obviously you're Scottish, but have you travelled in many different places? Because it's...
Yeah, it's a mess, right?
Yeah, it's a mess.
I've moved around to the UK a lot, and then my family mostly settled in Aberdeen when I was about 15, 16, and we actually stayed there they're still there. And so I was there for another 7-8 years. That's the longest period I've been in any location. Like most locations in my life, I wasn't there for more than 2-3 years. I think I've moved 17 times now.
Wow.
And so we moved around a lot in the UK, but when we settled in Scotland, we actually settled into like an expat community, which is like kind of like oil, like expats, all the kind of Americans, a lot of Americans, and not any type of American either, like American, you know, when you're like, oh, America, that American. Basically anyone you would imagine running around in a big, massive cowboy hat, boots, digging for oil. So yeah, that was a good chunk of my life hanging out with those people.
Properly stereotypical Americans. There's a bit in my book when I have a trip to Oregon for like a month, and I managed to, I travel around, I think I make it to 5 different states in America with no money, just swapping like art and artistic services for things, and did a lot of crazy swapping. But I think I have a line in it which says, you know, my flight to America went exactly as expected. I made friends, you know, boarding the plane, I made friends with a man called Rocky Blakewood who wore blue jeans and a cowboy hat and worked for Daimler Trucks and played the hurdy-gurdy.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
And then him and his wife invited me out to dinner as well when I got to Portland. I love it.
I can well imagine some of the nicest people in the world are the Americans, and some of the least nice people in the world apparently, but just the ones in charge. Yeah, that really bizarre. And then I moved to America. I spent a lot of time there. I've lived in Ireland. I've moved around, and then I was traveling and speaking all over the world. So I spent very little time anywhere other than on the road. And so I've kind of been exposed to everything and anything. And like when I was really young, I had this like chameleon accent. Like when we moved every couple of years, I would literally go from like when we lived in London, I spoke like very proper newsreader, like neutral London accent. And then we moved to like the country to like Gloucestershire. And like I came back from school on like day 3 and I was like, my mom was like, what the fuck happened to this thing? So I've always been a bit like that. And then at some point, I guess somewhere in my 20s, it just was like, we're done. Just have that. That's where you are now. And so it drifts a little bit here and there, but yeah, if I go home long enough in Scotland, really?
I was born in Welsh and spoke Welsh as a kid and then moved to Derbyshire and just had to change the accent. I was going to
say you don't have much Welsh at all.
They say son and mum. And I was like, wow, they speak so differently. I think, but then my accent, it's standardized quite a lot because when I was 18, I just wanted to go off and save the world and also escape. I think a lot of my missionary years were spent because I really didn't want to have to do things like get a mortgage and get a job and do paperwork. And I was like, that stuff is so scary that I would rather go off and just live in the Andes. I don't find that scary at all compared to paperwork. So I don't think it's
a very special type of person.
I don't think it was just the idea that, yes, I'm going to go and convert everyone for Jesus and be a hero. I think I was just running from paperwork. That's the truth. I wonder how many missionaries have similar motives underneath it all.
I wonder how many human beings could really probably have that tagline at some point, really. Just, my name's Phil Drysdale and I'm running from paperwork. You know, I mean, we all are really on some level. So it sounds like you were, I mean, as much as you were running from paperwork, you do sound like you were a fairly fundamental person early on, though. It sounds like, you know, you wanted to go and save the world on some level. You wanted to go and be this radical missionary. Like, is that fair that you kind of grew up quite a kind of radical, fundamental person? I mean, you're quite a radical person anyway, by the sounds of it.
I think it's, you know, if you're being fed a diet of penal substitutionary, you know, atonement as a young child through every song that you're listening to in church and through every sermon that's preached with an altar call at the end of it, you know, and, you know, you're reading the Bible through that lens and you're like, okay, so you guys are preaching this literally nonstop. And you actually believe that people who don't receive this message will go to hell. Why are you all just sitting down? If you're telling me this is true, that the Bible is 100% true, and that this is the angle from which to read the Bible, what are we doing? So I would, you know, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning praying for unconverted friends and crying and worrying. Though at the same time, I don't think I ever believed that the earth was created in 6 literal days. You know, I looked into that. You know, the word yom for day means non-specific period of time. So that stuff never stressed me out. But I was like, if this is the message, then we should do something about it. You know, why is no one worrying? And why would you invest in a career and a job and a house when those things aren't important? So that was...
It's a really crazy dynamic, isn't it? Like, I always say, I say this again and again and again, that I have so much admiration for people like the Westboro Baptist Church, you know, these kind of fundamental movements. I mean, ISIS even, I'm like, they have twisted their faith to believe a certain expression of it, and then they live it, right? I mean, they literally live it. And in other ways, they're making excuses for different things, you know, like, or whatever, but they are like passionate about what they believe. You cannot fault them for having some zeal behind what they believe. Whereas the average evangelical, they really passionately say they believe everyone's going to hell. I don't see it in their day to day. You know, they're not banging on their neighbor's door, like screaming, dude, please hear me out. I really think you're going to go to hell. And if you just gave me 10 minutes, I want to get you into heaven. I just do not want you to die. You know, that's not the day to day life of the average Christian. Yet they profess to believe some framework that really says that that's going to be happening. And it basically points out they're a bit like a bunch of dicks, right? I mean, we're terrible people if we don't really. I think there's a level,
you know, if you're looking at that kind of psychologically, there's a level, I don't know if it's like just tokenism or something, but if you've publicly said that you believe something, you've raised your hand, you've said, I'm a Christian, this is the stuff that I believe, it gives you permission to then not believe it in other ways. You know, if you look at things like, you know, as a country, we had a female prime minister a long time ago, therefore we're not sexist.
Yeah.
You know, America
never see one of them again.
Had a black president, therefore they're not racist. It's like once you've done something, you've said that therefore, you know, your conscience is clean and you can then go on and not be that thing anymore because you've proven that you are it. So I think there's an element of, you know, if you have people in churches who profess to believe in that things, and maybe if you know, maybe they've gone and they've done their, you know, they've tried to convert a few friends and then somehow they're kind of let off the hook a little bit. So my heart does break for people who are on this journey that we've been on and the people who are still on this journey. It's like, that seems to be, so have you just dedicated your life to this? Like, Phil, is this...
At this point.
So what happened? I dedicate
my life where it just happens.
Can I just ask what happened?
This, I don't know. Like, I still am figuring out, like, I have no idea what the hell is going on or which way's up. I'm just kind of figuring it out as I go. But along the way, I've realized I used to travel and speak in loads of different churches and do conferences and meetings and different things like that. And I was a lot more fundamental back in the day. You know, using something like spiral dynamics, I was probably still very traditional in my framework and maybe moved into some sort of modern, framework. But generally speaking was still very black and white fundamental. And And just as I was traveling, as I was meeting people, I'm just realizing, there's a lot of people that are like not so content, and they're asking questions. And the thing is, people ask questions when you're the person that just shows up to church every now and again. There's a safety in that you're gone next tomorrow, and they're not going to see you for another year or so. You're not going to rat them out to the pastor. You're not going to, condemn them. You're not going to screw up their social standing by, highlighting that they don't believe something or they have this question. And so people come to you with the
people
most
share when you're
bizarre
visiting.
questions or vulnerabilities, and they just open up. And you start to realize, God, half the church in every church I go to doesn't believe half the stuff. And they are questioning their stuff, and they're not really sure where to go and what to believe, and they're terrified, and they don't feel safe to talk about this stuff. And just realizing no one's really helping these people. No one. I mean, there's just, at the time, certainly back in the day, this is maybe 8-10 years ago now, there wasn't people helping people that were in that place that I could see. Not very publicly, not well known at least. There were some very famous figureheads that had fallen from grace that people might watch, So someone like a Rob Bell who had his love wins and everything explodes and everyone's like, oh, he's fallen away, but he's still kind of talking about some kind of Christian-y stuff, and people are like following his podcast or reading his next book and stuff. So there's people like that, but Rob wasn't going to sit down and chat with you. He's a busy guy, right? He's got his own thing going on in a whole world of wheels turning. And so for me, I was just like, gosh, there's a real need out here for people to kind of have someone that's just safe to talk to and process with. Not
keep yourself out there as that
another person that's going around doing ministry trips and, speaking to church groups and what, like, God, there's enough of those people, right? I mean, God, there's probably far too many people like that. And so, I just was like, let's kind of shift towards this need. And I've that's been an avalanche, it's just picked up pace, and there's been more and more people coming to that. And thankfully the space has grown and evolved, and there's more and more people doing that and creating space for people to come, to share, to connect, and so it's a really beautiful space now that
isn't that gap.
Isn't anymore. I don't feel it's centered around me. Whereas early on, because I didn't know anyone else, I felt the whole thing centered around me having to help people. Now I don't even feel that need of the weight of the world on my shoulder. I'm like, just one random schmuck doing a podcast every now and again, or chatting to someone on Instagram till 2 a.m, telling them it's going to be okay. Or that's fine. I can do that. I don't feel like too much pressure about that. It's just been one of those things. But what about you? How did you go from being, this kid racked with fear for her friends and needing to go to South America to get some people saved? How did you go from that to where you are now? What was what were the kind of key components that kind of caused you to kind of evolve, devolve, unravel? I'm not sure how you would.
I like unravel.
Label it.
I like the words ravel and unravel. Like the deconstruction can sound negative, and I also don't like the reconstruction. Yes, because I don't think you can really always reconstruct to the degree that you want to. There's a poem in here somewhere that I wrote. So I was in Argentina with a missions organization for 5 years. I worked in an arts group over there. I led outreaches. Eventually I went and spent another 2 years with the same organization in the Netherlands. But there was a moment, it was the moment when I was leaving Argentina. And I just randomly had a dream. I've always been a bit of a mystic, and dreams have always been important things to me. But there was, just find there it is. The Walls Fall Down. I called the chapter of my book "The Walls Fall Down," where it really all started to happen. There it is. So I was in this missions organization in Buenos Aires, and I had a dream in which I'm standing in the middle of this ancient kind of courtyard. It was like, if you imagine those giant stones like you'd see on the temple, and then I'm in this big space with this presence in this historic kind of landmark, towering walls, and then I just heard this sound of like an approaching kind of like tremor, and the ground started shaking, and then these walls just came down, and it was this experience that was like I was actually there. And I woke up that morning and opened the Bible, and it said something about, those verses in Haggai when it was saying, I will build a new temple, and the glory of the new temple will be greater than the glory of the old temple. And I was just like, wow, like everything's falling down. Like my Christian faith that has just been passed on to me, secondhand by all of these clever people that I don't really understand, but I've just been listening to them and trying to follow it. And now all of those big structures are falling down, and the new temple is going to be built, and it's going to be a religion that I can own. It's going to be a Christianity that I can connect with personally. I'm going to be like this amazing, like super Christian. This is like next level stuff. And then in that day, I remember people came up to me. Someone said, oh, I just had like a vision of an earthquake, and that God is doing new things in you, and blah, blah, blah. And I think there were about 3 or 4 people who came up to me that day, honestly, with like verses about new temples, and all of this stuff is happening. And so I was just like, wow, something really great's going to happen. And then I wrote this poem afterwards to describe kind of what that experience actually turned into. I called it Walls. Walls. For 2 decades, I sat in churches on sunny days, the world outside further away than the time-locked saints on the stained glass windows. The sun's light falls on me through their tinted halos, and I stretch out my toes in the borrowed light of transcendence. Until one day, I dream that I hear the earth roaring, and I see the great stones of the temple falling down around me. I am left exposed and cold, because the truths that have been my childhood friends have grown old and grey, while I have stayed young. And I stand in the same spot for years, staring in shell shock at the broken walls, waiting for it to be rebuilt, because I was told that the glory of the first temple will be nothing compared to the glory of the new. But they never came to understand glory in the way that I now do. I stopped regarding the rubble and notice I can see the sky bending down to reach me like a hug from otherness in a gown of blue. I stop looking down in frustration at the empty page I've come to be, and see instead before me the unbearable beauty of a newborn blanket of snow. Walls are the opposite of bridges. Walls are the arguments you're determined to win. Walls are built to keep you safe. Walls are built to keep you in.
Wow.
So that, after that, I was waiting for something to be rebuilt. I was waiting for my faith to be, built again, perhaps in exactly the same way, but this time with a greater sense of ownership. And it just never happened. I left Argentina. I joined the same organization in the Netherlands. I led another outreach to Venezuela, where honestly, the things that I saw and the way that people manage certain things, and I just thought, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't do Christianity. It's just not. It's just not working for me. But then I was left with nothing, and then that empty page, the white page that's waiting to be written. And for many years, I thought, I've got burnout. I'm just going to sit, with this space, and eventually something's going to be built here. And it never was, and it still really hasn't been. And I've learned that that lack of building, that lack of certainty, I then owned that as being, this beautiful, I don't even want to use words like foundation, because that sounds like it's waiting for like a structure to arrive in that. But it's just a sense of openness, So that was the beginning of my downfall.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, it sounds harrowing and terrible and frustrating and scary and all the different emotions, but it's also quite beautiful. The walls coming down, the appreciating the beautiful blue sky on the other side, and going, oh yeah, I've kind of been blocking myself off from all of this with all these nice, safe, certain, stable, solid walls that I do appreciate and love. I've been missing out. There's a whole nother world here. And like, I think it's a really hard transition to go from when you're at that stage, the psychological stage of needing certainty and safety and security, and we love walls in that place because it keeps the dangerous people away. It keeps us in with our group and what we know. It boxes in what's going to happen. It makes sure that we're right and we're not wrong and we're safe. We're not in danger. All the different components of like just feeling a part of something, maybe. And there's all that going on. And I don't think those desires disappear when the walls first start coming down and we start going, well, maybe there is something beyond these walls. The desire for some certainty, the desire for some kind of solid ground to stand on doesn't go away overnight. It might be that in time, over years, you become a bit more comfortable with uncertainty and you become a bit more going, I don't know how much I need a foundation. But that's generally speaking not a like on off switch, right? It's a drawn out kind of like, the whole way. What did that look like for you? I mean, what were some of the things that caused those walls to come down for you? Like, was it theological? Was it emotional? Like, what were the kind of situational?
I just have so many questions for you. Like what you're kind of referencing there is kind of saying when you have those walls, sometimes you need them. And if you're talking about, the blue area of like spiral dynamics or Richard Rohr talking about his boxes of order and disorder and reorder. And I think about my own kids and, I go to a church, or I did before lockdown, called the Order of the Black Sheep. My vicar is in Chesterfield and was in a heavy metal band. He's a very nice man.
Nice.
So that's an incredible space, lots of different people and different stages of kind of a similar journey to maybe the people who listen to this podcast. But I mean, like my kids don't have like that Christian youth group upbringing that I had, or that really solid kind of space of this is us and this is what we believe. And I don't regret having that. I honestly don't, because to have that sort of stability and that sort of firmness was a beautiful thing. So like, just because I'm talking about walls falling down, it doesn't mean that I'm saying that those walls shouldn't have been there anyway. But you're asking me like, about that process for myself. And the stuff that I really want to ask you is how the hell does spiral dynamics work in conjunction with personalities? Because when you're a personality type that naturally looks at all sides of a problem and that naturally questions, like, do you say that's because, you're just moving through the levels of spiral dynamics really fast? Surely that's just kind of the personality that you're born with. So there's an element of that with me. I don't think it's because I'm especially woke. I think it's just because I was born as a bit of a pain in the ass who asks too many questions.
Yeah. No, I think certain personalities are definitely inclined to move forward and grow more so than others. I think that's just a natural part of life, in the same way that certain people types are going to be faster than others, right? I mean, I'm not going to win any 100-meter sprints based on my genetic background. No chance. Never mind my daily diet and exercise routine, which is a whole nother level of no chance, right? So there's certain components that like different people are set up for different successes and different struggles. I think there's no doubt about it. But I do think, so I'm someone that questioned everything always, my whole life. I was a pain in the ass to every human being on the planet. I think my mom early on was like, ask questions, doubt anyone that tells you something is like this one way, including me. Ask me questions. Ask why I think that. Don't take it for granted just because I say something is true. I don't know everything. And I think she regretted that. I don't know if she raised my other siblings the same way because of it. I'm not sure. But, she was very like, she really instilled that in me, and I did it a lot. But it still took me 20 plus years. I mean, I was well into my late 20s probably by the time I really had started shifting out of blue. And I think I just moved through lots of different types of blue. I think on a fundamental level, I still was in a place probably on emotional levels, some other levels where I just really needed some stability and some black and white certainty, some of that safety I was yearning for. And I just bounced between different denominations, expressions. I think even if I'd left church, I would have found something else that I could have found some sort of certainty and stability. And I wouldn't have moved in the ways that I did when I did kind of leave church much later on, because I was in a place where I needed different things. And so I think there's a good mix of how it can look and what it can look like. But I do think some people are, generally speaking, very unlikely to grow and move beyond certain levels. So there's been studies done on human psychological development, and most models seem to suggest that where you are between the ages of graduating from university, about 22, 25, that kind of window, up to about 35. Wherever you are in that window is probably where you'll be when you die. Most people just won't grow beyond that. Which is
my ex-husband is a tattoo artist, and I'd always say to people, just don't get a tattoo before you're 30, ideally before you're 40, because it tends to be that, those kind of years of you figuring out who you are, and then you get to a certain point, you're like, this is me now, I'm done, get the tattoo.
That's it, yeah. Now I'll get my I love, Boris Johnson tattoo, not, in my wild 20s when I'm experimenting politically and then realize, God, I hate that guy and I've got a big tattoo of him on my ass or whatever,
Hey, there's something that I've got to say about that, because I was thinking about that today. If people get that tattoo and they get it of an ex-partner and then, or an ex-husband or an ex-wife or an ex-hero, like you're saying, Boris Johnson could have been someone that people would have loved earlier on in life, and they've got the big tattoo, got his face on their back, giant. And then it becomes, I've got to spend like £1,000 erasing that and tattooing something new. And I'm more of the vein of honestly, that's just part of who you are. Yeah. It's part of who you are. I heard of someone who went to get a tattoo and they were being a bit of an idiot, and they were, those younger years, and they were all they got this tattoo, and the tattoo was supposed to say courage in Chinese or something. And they came back and they asked someone what it said. They asked someone who was Chinese, and it just said brown rice. And it was they said, well, I was just being an idiot. I was a bit unkind to the tattoo artist, whatever they'd done. They're like, I earned this tattoo. This tattoo is this memory of who I was. And so that's my same thing when it comes to, throwing out the baby with the bathwater in regards to your early experience with the Christian faith. Do you then go I'm moving now, I believe in science, or I believe in something else? I was thinking of what is it called? Nacho Libre. I believe in science. I always have that voice in my head. Have you ever watched that movie? Anyway. So when you leave a relationship and it becomes, I'm going to cut this person out of every picture, I just feel that that's so sad. It's so sad to think I've wasted 20 years of my life in church. I've wasted 20 years of my life in this marriage. Now I'm just going to throw all of that away and start again. And it's such a lovely thing to do, is to kind of think, I've come out of an 11-year marriage, and I work hard to think, what are the positives from that experience that I can take forward? What are the things that I love about that person? And I love that you started this conversation with saying, Sundays, it's a holy day for me. Why not take those things forward? What were we talking about?
Absolutely. No, that is what we were talking about. This is it. The conversation we are having is the conversation we are having. I'm really intrigued by that, because I think, to me, people that follow me know that I hammer this on again and again and again. You have to kind of try and come to a place. It might not be immediate, but you have to come to a place at some point where you can look back and start to integrate, start looking through that and going, okay, yes, a lot of this was horrific. Yes, I did harm. Yes, it harmed me. But what was good? What developed me? What brought me to where I am? What can I make sure that I don't get rid of? Because actually some of this I might really want moving forward. That's really different for different people depending on where they're at as well. I think, depending on when you come to a point of a faith crisis, or when you break up with your partner, the love-scorned 17-year-old is probably less likely to deal with a breakup as well as the person that has been through 5 other breakups and, is maybe in their 50s at this point and has gone, I kind of, have a bit more stability. I understand. I see the world a bit differently. There's people at different stages of life are going to respond differently. And so maybe they're a little less likely to be cutting out their partner of every photo versus the 17-year-old who's holding a seance, burning the pictures and hoping that, the devil kills their partner, their ex or whatever. There's a whole spectrum there. And any 17-year-olds listen to this, some of you are a lot more stable than I am, so don't take this too personally.
They really are.
Especially these days, honestly. Raised on Netflix and YouTube.
Involved with a website called Workaway, and some of that's in my book too, where I took my kids out of school to home educate them, because I think you said, what happened with my journey, as soon as my relationship with Christianity crumbled, then it's well, what else is going to go? And it became education, the way I eat, the way I shop, all of these things started to crumble. So one of the things was was education. And so instead of sending the kids to school, I brought in people from different countries through this Workaway website. And so, they had a month of skateboarding with a Swiss skateboarder. They had a month of YouTube with a French YouTube star. They had Japanese sword fighting with an Australian. They had a Hungarian who was a dog trainer, and they were teaching them tricks to their guinea pigs. This was their experience of education. But I tell you what, most of these people were between 17 and 26, and gosh, I'm looking at them thinking, wish I'd been you when I was that age.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening, or maybe it was just me. Maybe I was just way further behind than I thought I was.
It's all possible, but I do think we're seeing more mature, open, inclusive, loving, emotionally intelligent, a bit more in touch with themselves, a bit less constrained to social constructs. All these things are starting to soften. It's certainly in certain cultures. I think other cultures might not be the same to maybe people that are coming through the average door in the UK or but yeah, I think on the whole, when we sit down with these kind of younger people, you're like, whoa, you're exploring things I never explored at all at your age. Or you think about when I don't know what age you are, but when I was in school, good God, I had no concept of what
39.
the world was like. Okay, so we're about the same age. I'm 36 next week. So, that was not our radar, right? We weren't watching, world films or, really world literature maybe in the same ways, or, we weren't watching YouTube stars from Kazakhstan and from LA. We were exposed to, Terry from across the street who's a bit drunk and hits his wife, and we all kind of talk about that and laugh, or, and we don't even realize that that's a serious thing, right? We don't even have a concept of domestic abuse. And we are so sheltered compared to the average kid today is going to be able to talk to you about consent and gender and sexuality. These are things that are a kid at 12 will be able to have a conversation with you about these things. It's a wild world. Amazing how much
my son, since forever, how old is he? 12. He just doesn't use gendered pronouns. He just uses they for everyone. No one's told him to do that. He's just thought that, it makes sense. Why would you not do that? Kind of kids are brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's really, it is incredible how people do go through that. But so I guess the reason I brought that up was I am intrigued by how you went through this process, because we talk about how it's really important to kind of integrate the past and maybe bring some of that with you and not be so reactive and throw the baby out with the bathwater or burn the whole building down. Was that what you did? Did you manage to do that well, or did you was that something that you came to the conclusion of much later on? Because I know people have very different experiences with that.
I'm not so it's just happened, just move on, there's no pain, peace and love. Yeah, I would have liked to have been that person. I think I just took a very long break. I tried to go back into churches because after coming through missions, then I had, I was married. I married someone from Argentina, and, I had a baby, and then it became oh shit, everyone's got a job. Everyone knows how to do life. I don't have, qualifications. All I've done is follow Jesus. And suddenly I'm living in a terraced house, in Derby with a baby, and and I'm scared of church. I go into a church and I start twitching. And so so I spent a long time like that. Eventually I met the church that I told you about, and very slowly I realized they were just people exactly like me, and they earned my trust. So I slowly opened up with them. I remember even whilst I was home educating the kids, going into an evangelical church because it was a space that we were renting to do some projects with the kids. And I went in and I saw all the signs on the walls, and I was like, oh, I'm really reacting. I'm really I'm melting, sort of physical reaction just to the space. And my advice to people, and I've heard people going I just need to get over this. I just need to go back into those spaces, and I need to just embrace it and just love people. I'm if your body just isn't ready for that, you shouldn't push yourself into those spaces, because that really hurts. When when you felt unsafe in a space, to immediately stay in that space when your body is reacting to it. I'm just get out until you're in a space where that feels okay, you know. And then, you know, maybe several years went by, and with a friend, I started visiting, you know, just out of love for my friend and neighbor. I started visiting her church with her occasionally. And it was, you know, my kids went with me once and they said, wow, it's like Christian TV, because it was all flashy lights and pogoing and people jumping Amazing. Up and down. And I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting up on a Sunday morning with something to do. You know, so either for me, it's a car boot sale or going to church, and talking with people and having a cup of coffee after the service and meeting with people. But it reminds, from my experience, it, you know, reminded me of what you said you started to find when you were someone just visiting a space and people start to talk to you. And I started to realize that there was, you know, what is this gospel that was being taught, you know, that Jesus came to save us. You know, we were in a mess. Jesus came to save us. We're okay now. We're okay now. So maybe if you're not okay, maybe Jesus hasn't saved you, or, you know, you didn't say the prayer right, or you've not let him in enough. So if you're struggling with depression, maybe the best thing to do is to stop going to church, because people are just going to say, hallelujah, isn't it amazing what God's done in us? And, you know, and for people looking at themselves thinking, well, they're all okay. I'm not okay, but this is not a space where I can say that I'm not okay, because I should be okay because Jesus has saved me. And that was really something that I encountered. And so what my book is called Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns. There was a story that I had in which I got stranded on the wrong side of the Andes. I'd missed the bus. I was with some friends, needed to get back. I managed, I had to get back. There was a ferry, with a car ferry, and there wasn't a bus. So the only way for us to get back across this kind of lake on this car ferry was to be on one of the cars. We didn't have a car. So it was a matter of just hitchhiking and just asking, you know, who we could, you know, hitchhike with. And we'd had a meal in a little restaurant it was in Chile just before that. And on a neighboring table, there were some nuns who were on holiday, and they were definitely very tipsy. And they were lovely. And they were like this little family unit, and they were on holiday, and they were just, I was like, oh, I just want to be one of those. They look nice, you know. And fortunately, because I love, you know, you read, you know, you heard my introduction to my book. I just love a funny story. So I'm like, oh my God, please let it be the nuns. Please, God. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, sure, you can get in the back with the luggage. So we had this journey, you know, through customs with these slightly drunken nuns. And I'm just like, oh, that's just beautiful. How much of a story there actually was in that, I didn't really know, but I just love that as a title, Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns.
It's a fantastic title.
But I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, what is this? What is the Christian journey? Is it like I buy a ticket? You know, I buy a ticket from God. Jesus, through his blood, paid for this magic ticket for me. I've got the ticket. Now I get on the train. The train goes in a straight line. I get off at the stop that I'm supposed to get off at, you know, and I have a lovely conversations along the way, and it all goes to plan because I've got my magic ticket. Or is life this thing where suddenly you've lost your ticket, you've got to stick out your thumb, see who turns up, who are these spiritual guides that, you know, who are these tour guides that accompany us on our, you know, on our faith journey? Are they like, I am a tour guide, I have read all of the books, or are they just nuns that are on holiday and they're a little bit drunk? And, you know, so that became for me, like, this is just, honestly, it's how I've lived my life. You know, my marriage failed. I met someone wonderful who then took his own life after that. You know, I moved house to put my kids into a good school. It didn't work out. I took them out and had to home educate them. Life has been for me about a series of, I forgot to buy a bus ticket. I lost my bus ticket. And then it's been, well, what do I do now? Do I actually, like, I feel that some Christians have done when they've gone, this is not the life I was promised. This is not the Christian journey I thought I would be on. And also, if God has a plan for your life, God has a plan for your life. God doesn't have some plans for your life. God doesn't have a myriad of like optional journeys. God has a plan for your life. And if you buy into that, and then suddenly your husband leaves you, God's plan has been scuppered. Like someone's like turned the board over. Someone's like ripped up your your ticket, and then you can't get to where you knew you had to be going. You're thrown off the path, which was the only path, because it was God's plan. Yeah. So then it became for me this embracing of, it's the hitchhiking. Okay, so I stick out my thumb. I've got a friend called Andy Rain, and he founded the Northumbria community and lives up on Holy Island. And he wrote this beautiful poem that he read to me once. And he said, "What do you think that's about?" And I said, are you trying to say that God's will recalibrates itself like some sort of a heavenly sat nav? He was like, yeah, you got that. And so for me, it's that idea, like, do you know when you get lost? Do you remember when we used to get lost when we didn't have sat navs? And it was oh no, we're off the route. We had the route planned out. Everyone in the car would be screaming and shouting. Your parents would basically be getting a divorce. Yeah. All of those things would happen. And now it's kind of, if you've got a sat nav, it's just rerouting and off you go. So like my thing is that I kind of figured out on my journey, through a lot of painful twists and turns, that, it wasn't just a single plan that there was for my life. It was this beautiful adventure of, chance in the hand of God. I don't know what it was, serendipity that is surfed like a wave. It became that thing. And that's kind of going back into those evangelical spaces and seeing people who are heartbroken because maybe God doesn't love them as much as God loves other people because their child died of cancer, and everyone told them that if they had enough faith and prayed, that child wouldn't die, and the child died, so therefore the child must have died because of their lack of faith. And you're just wanting to give those people a hug and say, maybe that's not what it was. So yeah, I can really talk about this stuff. I can really
this is huge. I mean, it's a massive deal, but like we get so hammered over the head with the concept of God's plan, the one, like we have all these kind of like points in the path of like, oh yeah, so there's one person for you to have in your life that you're supposed to marry. Oh, great. Okay, so who was that, and which one was it? Is it this person? And what if someone else marries that person before I get to them? Well, I heard how does that work out?
That if you're still single and you can't find the person that God's chosen for you, maybe it was because that baby was aborted.
Wow.
You heard that one?
I haven't. It adds up. I mean, I could believe that if I was a very fundamental Christian that believed that these were people that God had a will for and a life for, and someone came in and murdered them. And, that whole narrative, you could build a whole world around that. Absolutely.
Your one chance has been blown.
Trauma that creates, because it's like, wait, so the reason I'm single is because someone aborted my husband or wife. Great. Yeah. Good. Thanks. Yeah. Or even, just the fact that, I have a friend that's a researcher and he did some research in the gender gap in Christianity, but it crosses actually most religions. But there's two, if you look across Christianity and you look at single people, there's 2 females for every 1 male. And so just the fact that people are sitting down and talking to young girls in the church and saying, God has someone out there for you, and the fact they're saying, and you have to marry a Christian, means they are categorically setting up 50% of these girls to be absolutely wrecked emotionally and spiritually. It's really fucked up, because what happens is then they go out there and the guys will pick up, 50% of these girls, and the other half go, oh, maybe I'm called to singleness. Maybe maybe it was the aborted baby that, maybe, I screwed up. Maybe it's because I secretly like to masturbate occasionally. Maybe it's because I, slept with that guy in high school once and then lived with guilt for it for the whole life. Maybe, and nothing but guilt and shame over the fact that they were never going to get to marry a Christian guy. That wasn't an option because there was half the Christian guys out there. Yeah. The other options are guys marry a couple girls each. We go for same-sex marriage, or we marry a non-Christian. Those aren't popular in the evangelical Christian church, believe it or not. None of those 3 are big options. And so, like, we're stuck teaching things that are really harmful. And I feel for the people that are stuck teaching that, because they need to believe that God has his perfect will. And yet there is like such a much more beautiful way to approach this of a story, right? Not a plan, but God's goes on an adventure with us.
Those girls could be told that. Actually, no, the odds are just stacked against you, and it's just not your fault. It's not your fault if you don't find someone. So the other person, let's talk about that Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns thing, the idea of being open to this journey of serendipity that has twists and turns, and also the idea, I think, what's his name, who wrote the God Can't, Thomas Ord, who wrote the God Can't book, and I've not read the book, but I've listened to him talk a lot, and I just think, the idea that God is just not this person who is just controlling everything, but is just, it's just like this force of love that's like gravity that just flows in the direction that it's able to flow in and works in the way that it's able to work in. And I just find that, that version of God just sits with me so much more comfortably than someone who could help all the starving people but chooses not to. Yeah. So this theology just sounds like theology, let's just sit and stroke our beards and sip cappuccinos in coffee bars and talk about these things. But actually, how it deeply, deeply affects your actual life. I think in my book, I say, the sort of God that you believe in, it becomes the sort of person that you are, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Then you inhabit the universe that you've created in your mind. And then that universe is governed by the God that you allow to govern it. So this stuff, stripping down our ideas of who God is and how we relate to them, it's also important. For me, Peter Rowland's helped me a lot, or his ideas helped me. So I listen to, since I've been about 12, I've listened to Radio 4. That's the BBC, talk radio for people in America. And in the beginning, just didn't understand anything. But I was I just like words because I write, and the music that I listen to is always with, Leonard Cohen. It's always the beautiful lyrics before even, the sound of the music itself. So I'd listen to Radio 4 and it would wash over me. I'm not understanding a lot of this. After years and years and years of it, slowly some words became words that I could use myself. Some words became words that I understood just through exposure. That was my experience of listening to Peter Rowland.
Yes,
absolutely. I'm squinting at everything he's saying, going what? So I guess that was maybe your thing with spiral dynamics. Now I can hear that you're quite fluent in talking about that stuff. But in the beginning, you've got to, it's just the amount of hours you've got to expose yourself to these things. So I'm listening to Peter Rowland, on YouTube. I'm listening to him talk. And then there was just one thing that just properly clicked. I'm saying that's an introduction because people will be I'm going to go and listen to Peter Rowland's now and get some answers. It's
absolutely amazing, but you'll get some questions.
You'll get some questions. Answers. You're not going to get any answers. No, I'm just going to say that first. So when he was talking about, how we're trapped between depression and melancholy, we are in this place where we're depressed because we're stuck and we can't move forward because we don't think we're good enough, or we've got these sort of limits that we've set ourselves, and that's just depressing. And then eventually we do find a way of moving forward. We get the thing that we thought we wanted, or the thing that we did want, and it leaves us unsatisfied. So we get melancholic because we've got the wife or the job or the faith or whatever it is, and we're still left wanting. So I found that a lot of his theology was the only theology that was dark enough for me to be of any use.
Yeah.
So, at that point, I'd met someone new who answered every one of my unasked questions, who was a fellow creative. We were working together. We were communicating together. We had so many similar parts in our journeys. And I was thinking, if this relationship works out, that could answer so much of my life. That could make so much of my life make sense. But then I had this voice, Pete's voice in my head saying, but then you get the thing that you thought you wanted, or the thing that you did want. And life is still going to be hard. It's still going to be difficult. So once I came to the point of understanding nothing's going to ever completely resolve, you go back to books like Blue Like Jazz, and you're talking about looking at the stars and trying to see music and how life is like jazz because it doesn't resolve. And we hear those things and think those words are nice and poetic. But actually, I think so often we're looking to get to a place that we think will satisfy us. All of the stuff that's gone on, all of the career changes that have happened from COVID, that we're feeling that we're still going to get to a point where things resolve. There's a point in the future where things are going to be okay. So for me, I kind of tried to, when I was writing my book, I was trying to write something that was a bit of an antithesis to kind of self-help, because self-help says you're not okay. There's a place in the future where you can be okay if you buy this book or if you buy into this culture. and you do all of these things right, and you will have all of the answers. But self-help needs us to start from the point of saying that where we are now isn't okay.
Yeah.
So there was a level in which there was a deep click with that, and I kind of thought, even if my life, if I did get these things that I thought I wanted, I would still be in the same place as I am now. I would still be on the same journey that I'm on now. So why not just start being now? Why not, surely that's the way to connect to the present. Because once I realized that the future isn't going to give me any more answers, that the future isn't even a place I necessarily really want to be in or need to be in, I felt free to live in like the awful messiness and the pain of the present, and just to find grounding, in that, to find like completeness in the incompleteness, to find resolution in the questions. So like, that's kind of where, my journey took me. I think that when you have people who are asking questions, who are in the church, who are coming out and they're asking themselves these questions, but they're shushing the questions. They're like, shouldn't be doubting. Doubt is bad. I shouldn't be doubting. Believe your beliefs and doubt your doubts. Like, we should be allowed to lean into those questions and to be present in that space of questions. And once we just let ourselves do that, suddenly we're doing the thing that we know we should be aiming for, which is being present, being mindful, being in the moment. But the moment's never going to be perfect, is it?
No, far from. In most people's experience, at least. I mean, certainly in mine. Yeah. No, I think that's very insightful. I think many people live their lives, certainly when we're brought up in these kind of fundamental black and white worlds. It's not even that we've been sold a self-help journey to perfection. It's like what you were saying earlier, where like, no, now you're in perfection. We all have to put this big smile on, nod and say, yeah, no, I'm great. Everything's wonderful. I'm saved. I'm Christian. I'm happy. I'm not depressed. I'm not sick. I'm not whatever. And anytime we are any of those things, there's this kind of like subconscious, maybe quite conscious at times, narrative of like, what are you doing wrong? Where did you drop the ball? Where are you not ticking the box? Is it because you have that doubt? Is it because you have that secret sin? Is it because you don't believe hard enough? And we need to be in this kind of like have a destination, and certainly if not be there, certainly know the next couple of steps, and we're basically there, and that's all we need to do. And I think when we step out of that world and we, the people I talk to, they're like, oh, I don't even mind that Christianity is wrong or whatever it is they believe, like I don't mind that. I just want to know what's right. I want to know, where do I go? What's the path there? Give me, and they'll come to me and go, Phil, be my new pastor, basically, right? They're going, give me the word from on high of what I should do, how I should live, what steps I should take to get to where I need to be, what that thing is, and I'll be happy. I don't even need it to be Christianity. If you laid out a system for why Islam is right, I'd be in. They just want a nice, clear path to the next thing that is right. And the problem is that works for some people. I think it does. I think a lot of people that transition from maybe evangelical fundamental forms of Christianity into maybe progressive forms of Christianity are kind of doing that a lot of the time. They're moving into another kind of certain, oh, well, here we are. We've got it right. We basically had it right. We just need to let go of penal sub, maybe some hell, let the LGBTQ community come in and do a bit more social justice. There. We figured it out. We're in. We've got it.
How many days do I have to spend in deconstruction before the reconstruction?
Exactly. Before I get to that.
It's been 24 hours. Is that enough time to just swap the system for a whole new system?
This has been a terrible day, Phil. Am I good? Am I done? And some people, yes. Yeah, that does seem to be. And they really function and thrive in a system like that. But on the whole, most people don't get that nice landing pad where they get a nice certain. I think some people that transition into a very hard atheism can do that as well. Sometimes they're doing the same thing. They're finding a very solid landing pad that's very black and white. But it does feel that most of us are starting to come out and go, oh, maybe there's not a destination. Maybe this is just maybe the ticket I get, it doesn't have a destination written on it. It's like, you live on a train now, but I'm here. The divine is here, and we'll enjoy the train rides, and we'll get off every now and again at every stop and go for a journey and explore and learn and pick up some things, and then we'll jump back on the train and go on the journey again. But we're not, there isn't it's 12 more stops until we get to perfection. It's, no, this is perfection. If you can stop and be present and enjoy it and wake up and look at it and go, God, this is shit right now because that thing happened to my friend and I'm feeling a bit depressed, but it's actually perfect. That's okay. These things are okay. The bad, the good, it's all what is. That's a really hard transition to make, I think.
There's one more element, like in my personal journey, to that, because you can talk about, focusing away from it just being about the destination to it's about the now, and there is no destination, which can sound like, oh, it's the journey, is the destination, and then you can like turn it into a little poster.
It's very cliche.
Put it on your wall. For me, when you're talking about heaven, was always the destination. You have a miserable life, but you're storing up treasure in heaven. But if you're going back to what Jesus said about the kingdom of God, it is among you, but more often than not, you can't see it. So my person, after coming having very close experiences with death, I think I moved from the place of believing in heaven, that it was a thing that happened to you when you died, to believing probably in nothing. And then coming to a place where, I currently believe that it is the present moment and it is the now that connects us to the heaven, which exists throughout time and can be reached. I think that, when you die, we are kind of absorbed back into the loving heart that sits at the heart of the universe. I'm not all just like completely, it's science is my new God now. I believe in nothing. But I do believe, when you're talking about it just being, well, it's the journey, it's not the destination, but it's the present moment, that if you kind of go deep enough into that, if you tunnel right down into it, you connect with this kind of heaven or nirvana or, Garden of Allah or whatever you want to call it, this place that can be accessed by people. And I just find that there's an idea that isn't there, probably people from my background think, oh, Emily's backslidden.
Yeah.
She believes in science now, she doesn't believe in God. And isn't that sad that nothing's spiritual for her anymore? But for me, actually, living in this world where I believe that everything, that the spiritual things that were going to happen to me were going to happen to me after I died, and I was going to be in this magical place. I'm actually, in a place in my life where I think that same place can be accessed daily if you want it to be, if you're able to, whilst you're having your cup of tea or walking the dog or washing the dishes or shouting at the children or whatever you're doing, you can be aware of this kind of underlying reality, which is not a distant thing at the end of life, but is a thing which is very much now. And just saying, oh, there is no destination, it's just a journey, sounds like a bit of a poor alternative, maybe. Like you're never going to get anywhere. You've just got the now. You've just got, do you know what? Going on holiday, to the seaside, maybe, going to Spain. It's not about Spain and the beach and the ice cream, kids. It's just about this car journey to the airport with mummy and daddy arguing. Isn't that fun? Because it's all about the journey. And if we're told that it's just the journey and that you'll never get anywhere and you're going to be stuck in this perpetual cycle of driving around in a car with people having arguments, being stuck on a train with someone with bad body odor, and you're never actually going to go and sit on the beach and put your feet up or go and hike those mountains. It doesn't sound very exciting, does it? Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is that we are all on journeys and a lot of us don't do it well, right? So at the end of the day, while it is about a journey and not the destination, it's about engaging with that journey in a totally different way, right? So like you're talking there, if we have this very rigid spiritual concept, right? So this is spiritual, that's not spiritual. These people are spiritually saved. These people are spiritually dead, or, all these kind of things like people will say to you, oh, Emily's gone and backslidden. She's not spiritual anymore. And you're like, actually, I'm spiritual, but I'm just spiritual in the ways you are and the ways that you think can't be spiritual. I'm actually spiritual in every area.
Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just really not spiritual in any way and I'm just completely deluded.
Who knows? But maybe they are as well, so we can play that game all day. But I think it's the thing of it's starting to go, no, what it is, so why do I enjoy the beach? Why did I enjoy that hike? Why did I enjoy hanging out with my family in Spain, but not hanging out with my family in the airport on the way to Spain? And it's going, what is that thing? And can I do that in the airport? Can I do that at work? can I do that when I'm juggling 3 kids and trying to fold laundry and not, trip over the dog and kill someone that comes to the door to ask if I want to donate to charity just because I'm at the end of my tether? Can I do it in all these different concepts, not just in Spain, not just when I'm, finally got a moment on my own, at the end of the day? Or
honestly, I think that's like almost all of the conversation, isn't it? Surely.
It is, right? I mean, but that's it. It is all this thing. It's learning to be present and connect and realize, gosh, this very second is just as spiritual as the last one. It's just as full of potential as the last one. It's just as much the kingdom of God as the last one. And it's just as much the kingdom of God as any other moment I could construct in the future in my wishful thinking. The holiday I'm dreaming of, the heaven and nirvana I'm going to get to one day. It could be this moment. It could be.
Do you ever hear people talking about mindfulness and meditation, and you're like, oh no, something else to add to my to-do list. Like, I'm already trying to keep the house clean and I'm failing so
Seriously.
much. And I'm supposed to be walking the dog more, and the dog needs walks, and the kids want quality time, but I've now got to meditate for 2 hours. I'm going to have to get up at 5 o'clock. And then you've not meditated, or you've not had some time for you. You've not had time for you as well as time for everyone else, and you're failing, and you're never going to be a spiritual person. Mm-hmm. I started to think at one point, can mothers ever be enlightened? Can you ever reach a state of enlightenment? Or is that something just for unmarried men who can go and sit up a hill somewhere and be a monk or be a hermit and have all of this time? It's mothers just can't do that because you're always behind. There's always stuff that you should be doing that you're not doing. Obviously that isn't, your mothers don't have a monopoly on that, but that's my experience. So it's that thing, isn't it, of how, even whilst I'm having an argument with my children, how am I going to be in my body? How am I going to be? The word intentional such a good word. Intending to do things, not just doing something because someone's accidentally dropped you into the wrong life and you're just living it going, oh, what's this? What's that person? What am I supposed to do? Oh no, there's something I haven't done. Do the thing. And what am I doing anyway? To live like that, it's so easy. I spend a lot of my life living like that, to be honest. I have moments where I feel, connected and everything makes sense. But most of the moments, I have are just spent going, trying to going through the big piles of odd socks and, standing on.
No, I hear you. Yeah. Well, it's these stories that we're telling ourselves constantly, right? I mean, we're constantly framing our whole world in a story. And then our world never lives up to this story, right? So the story is that I should be enlightened. The story is I should be the perfect husband. I should be the perfect mother. I should be much more intentional about doing meditation. I should be more connected to God. I should have my spiritual life figured out. And all these stories we're telling ourselves are just torturing ourselves, right? Because they're not the truth, right? I mean, the reality is I am what I am, right? I'm not going to meditate 10 hours a day because I don't meditate for 4 hours a day. I don't meditate for 4 minutes a day. So let's first of all get realistic and go, telling myself I should be meditating for 8 hours a day or whatever is only setting myself up to just be tortured the whole day and feel like a terrible human being. And I think we do this nonsense. I think this is probably a very default component to human nature on some level is creating these narratives and then beating ourselves up. But I do think we learn to do it really well in an upbringing in the church. I mean, if there's a place that builds a narrative about shoulds and should nots, the evangelical church has got that down, right? We love to paint the should and should nots and then live entire lives full of guilt, right? You shouldn't have a sex drive. Good God. I don't know any guys or girls that don't live with absolute tormented shame and guilt just because they're teenagers, right? And it's because they're taught you should not on any level have any form of sex drive. God, what a way to screw up a person.
If you've even looked at a woman in the wrong way, you've committed adultery in your heart and all of those
Exactly.
things.
Yeah. I mean, how many people are running this narrative nonsense? I mean, I was for, God, a decade straight, probably more. And most people I know are doing that. And it's not even, I think it's more acceptable to talk about that for guys because it's a big thing that all the guys are constantly talking about their addiction to porn and this and that and whatever. And it's because the guys are constantly, they're just carnal beasts and, but then that creates a whole narrative where a whole bunch of girls are going, oh, well, guys are like sexual beings and they can't control themselves. But girls, they don't get turned on easily. They actually have to, they have to be wooed and foreplay for hours. Well, a girl that actually gets turned on quickly, which, by the way, about a third of women get turned on just as quickly as, 2/3 of men, and vice versa, they're now creating this whole narrative of like, I'm dirty, I'm evil, I shouldn't have a sex drive like a guy does. And so we've got these stories constantly tormenting people. It's just a really messy situation.
It's the thing where, if you talk about spiritual abuse, as opposed to the abuse you'd receive in an office or in a relationship, you can leave the office, you've got a bad boss, you shut the door, the boss goes home to his house, you go home to your house. Or even if you're in a relationship that's bad, you can leave the relationship. But if your the God in your head is this constant voice of like, you're not good enough, you take that with you everywhere. Mm-hmm. And if the version you have of God is a version that doesn't move or change, then you can't be rid of that. Yeah. And it becomes this, that's a real act of faith for me, is thinking, well, my beliefs are things that I choose. My beliefs aren't the things that are actually true, because it would be ridiculous to thinking that I'm the only person in the universe who actually has everything right, and that my beliefs are the definitively true ones. So my beliefs are the things that I choose to believe. And why not, choose to believe in a God who is loving, and a God who is kind, and a God who is good? Because we know deep down that anything else other than that just jars with us. We meet someone who says that they believe in God, but they're an awful person, and they say God is like this, and God is wrathful, and God is vengeful, and but I think if for me, I just looked deeply at things, and deep into my own heart, and deep into other people's hearts, and thought, I'm just going to choose to believe in a God that is a God of love. And if there are verses in the Bible that feel that they contradict with this, then honestly, I don't speak Greek and Hebrew. I'd rather just believe that the loving, core of the universe, that the center of everything is good, and that it's on our side. When it's so easy to live life thinking everything's against me, that day didn't work out, the universe is deliberately against me. And honestly, if the universe in your head is against you, you're not going to win. How can you win against the universe? That's like, So I think it just takes that act of faith. And I think if there's people who've come from this background of faith, just believe things. It's like, well, now, you get to choose. You get to choose the direction that your faith is going to take. And if it's going to take faith, why not use that faith and say, this is the God that I choose to believe in, the sort of God that I want to see show up for me, the sort of God I want to see show up for my friends and the people that I love, the sort of, love that I would like to see taking root around me. And it's so easy to spend a lot of time. I did it actually, when I'd reconnected back with kind of church, and I found this group of people who were very similar to me. I needed a lot of laughing. I needed a lot of time to going like, oh my God, did you sing this song in church with that lyric? Did you think what I thought about that lyric? Did you think that thing? Oh, you did. I thought I was alone. That's really funny. Can we laugh for 20 minutes now? Yeah. Like, I've done all of that because I think I needed to, because there was a bit of a healthy catharsis in feeling that the times when I'd suffered alone, and feeling that then I had a chance to kind of to suffer alongside people who had also been suffering alone. And I think that's probably what a lot of your community does. So I'm not kind of belittling that, but I do think there is a time for now we've talked about this awful God that had been created, by the people in our upbringing. And now it's time to just, let's let that version of God just go on the back burner for a bit. And let's just use our faith and start to believe in the God that we really believe exists. Yeah. Even if that, I love all Paul Tillich stuff about the ground of being, in Christ we live and move, and all of those things. For me, coming back to that as kind of like a meditative place, when suddenly anxiety hits. Struggle loads with anxiety after some of the stuff I've been through in life. It's really easy just to have this underlying sense of anxiety kind of underpinning those daily events. But to think, to have these little mantras and things that we repeat to ourselves. And it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? To get to think, I can talk for a long time about all the things I don't believe and all the ways that people hurt me. And honestly, some of that is probably good, and it's good to acknowledge things and not pretend that they didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's also a time when I actually want to start talking about some of the beautiful things again.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, when you have gone about reconstructing, I hate that phrase as well. But
isn't that funny that you hate that phrase, but then you're forced to use it because
I'm just thinking you are constructing a framework, a narrative in which to exist, right? So you're talking about, I'm going to use my faith. I don't know. Do any of us know? I don't know that. I've come to this place where I'm at least able to admit that now. A bit more humble, going, well, actually, we never knew anyway. We were just kind of guessing as best we could anyway. But you're going, but I am going to exercise this faith to go, well, if I'm going to believe in something, like, let it be good. Let it be amazing. Let it be this thing that is beautiful, that is, inclusive, that is whatever, that is for me, that is not destructive and violent and punitive and whatever. When it comes to constructing that framework and that thing to believe in, do you feel that you pulled a lot of that from the kind of the background which you are letting go of? Like, it sounds like you still are very much framing a lot of it in a Christian kind of concept to some degree. Is that fair to say? Or is there a kind of this blend where you are pulling a lot of stuff that comes from your path from Christianity, or is this
hard to know, isn't it, when you live inside your own head?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a very hard thing to escape your own subjectivity, I guess. But
I think I always read a lot, and I think for me, there's two things that I've been grateful for, and that's been perhaps reading, and the other one's travel. So I think that's been the two best ways that I've had to find a perspective that is outside my own perspective. Because if I'm just going to talk about, the conversations I've had with people, or all of the, the church experiences that I've had, if that had been the only input, and I'd had to constantly go through this process of kind of reshuffling those words, reshuffling those early experiences in my head and rearranging them and trying to make sense of them. I've also had thrown into that mix, huge amount of reading that I've done, studying as well. It was lovely to get a degree, several years ago with the Open University, and to be introduced to all of those things. And like, travel is such a beautiful thing. And I speak a little bit about that in my book, because I didn't just want to do like an Eat, Pray, Love book. And I love that book. I really do love that book. But there was an element of it. It's like, oh, Liz, it's so great for you that you had the money to go and travel the world for a year. Like, I wish everyone who went through a divorce could do that. I really do. But there's a bit for me when I say, travel is a really important way to get outside your head and to gain some fresh perspectives from different cultures. But I honestly think that you can travel when you go down to the corner shop and the owner is from a different country, and you can ask him about his childhood. I think that there's an element of travel when speaking to older people or younger people and people from different generations, and you can say, okay, your outlook and your experience is different to mine. That comes from curiosity. And I love the word curiosity. And me and my husband were talking about that recently. And we're like, if you are certain, if you hold certainty, that removes the space for curiosity. Because if I'm certain that I already know you, if I'm certain that my beliefs are the right ones, why would I listen to you? Why would I be curious about you? Why would I be curious about a different culture when I'm certain that my culture is the correct one? So when you move into this kind of like space of, in inverted commas, deconstruction, there's uncertainty kicks in, and with that comes curiosity. And with curiosity comes like interest in other cultures, interest in other perspectives, interest in other stories. So I think all those things are connected. And when you're going back and you're using the word like deconstruction, reconstruction, I love the word just creative. I think it was Brian McLaren who spoke about creative Christianity, and Peter Rollins talks about that in another way as well. So it's rather than this linear, progression, of a kind of a faith journey, but rather having these little creative forays. I wonder what's down here. Oh, that didn't work out, but I learned something. Oh, what's this way? Or Alan Watts, who says that life is not a journey, it's a dance. There's music playing. How do you respond to that music? You shuffle off this way, you shuffle off that way, you do a move in this direction, you come back to the center, you fall off the stage. Like, life is just, rather than it being, it's all deconstructed. Now it's all been put back together again. That sounds like, it sounds formulaic in a way, doesn't it? Like, here are some pieces come apart. We're going to use the same pieces. We're going to put them back together again. But I love just thinking about life and about faith and religion and philosophy and theology as just creative experimentation, just giving yourself permission to be curious, which I think comes from giving yourself permission not to be certain.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a degree of needing to come to a place where you could be wrong, and that's okay. I think that's a big step for a lot of people, is because I don't think many people feel safe to explore and to experiment in their faith, because they grew up in the concept of, if you step out of line, you're absolutely screwed. You are done. Like, you're, burning in your own fat for eternity. And so it takes this point of coming to a place where on some level we can let go, like, oh, I don't believe that, or I'm not sure I believe God would do that, or, it's some leeway. At a certain point we start to go, okay, open theism, like Thomas Ord or whatever. And you just go, that sounds interesting. I might live my life like that's true for 3 weeks and see how it affects it.
Try it on.
Maybe it's right, maybe it's not. I've lived like that for quite a while now, where I hear something, I'm like, ooh, what if I pretended that was true? I don't know what I think about it, but it's kind of a beautiful way to see the world. I'll just live like that's true for a week and see if my life is better or worse. And
there's a jacket that you're thinking about buying. Just try it on a little bit, see how it fits, see how you feel.
Absolutely.
Go to a party in it.
Yeah. And that's easier to do when you know that the shop isn't going to penalize you and charge you for the full price of the jacket if you on any level spill anything on it, right? Because if you do that, then you're really not fully experiencing this jacket, right? You're wearing the jacket, but you're inside and you're not going anywhere. It might get anything spilled on, There's
maybe a friend gives you the jacket and says, you can keep this jacket if you want to keep it, but you don't have to keep it.
It's a totally different way. So I think there is a psychological breaking down of this fear of getting anything wrong. It's such a huge hurdle for most people. Like, how did you get through that component of feeling like you had permission to explore and to try on the new jacket, without a fear of screwing up, of getting it wrong, of stepping out of line?
I think there's a real underlying fear of offending God. Do you know, like when you've been told, when you've had a friend and then they've disappeared, and it's like they've actually disappeared, and everyone around you going, they backslid, they fell off the edge, they went to the dark side. So like they started talking about Buddhism, and and then we didn't see them again, and now God won't talk to them either. There's this sense of like, if I go too far in one direction, what am I going to find? If I ask too many questions, am I going to find that God, there's a spotlight on the bits of God that we're allowed to look at. You really don't want to look at the other bits of God, because God's really creepy in those other places. You do not want to see what he's doing when we're not looking. You don't want to see that. So once I got to the place of, and I think I probably read that or heard that somewhere, someone saying, maybe even heard it on a podcast, but someone saying, honestly, you can just trust that God is not going to be offended if you start believing outrageous things. Like God's a lot bigger than the little thoughts going on in your head and the little beliefs that you allow yourself to have or don't have. But when you just say God is more loving than you can comprehend and bigger than you can comprehend, and will not be offended by your little forays into other religions, or your little forays into like, oh, can I be an atheist for a month, or whatever it is, you feel drawn towards. Obviously with those things, it's like, I'm not just saying, do anything, God's always there, take drugs, go crazy. You can if you want. But, for me, I didn't really go to any of those places, because I just thought, I just want life. I just want to breathe a bit easier. I just want to, to love more easily. I want to feel more loved. And that is the direction I chose to move in. Like, if I was going to say, I'm so angry at God that I want to hate them and I want to be a Satanist just to piss God off, because God will still love me because God's really big and God will love me even if I'm a Satanist. Like, who knows, like hypothetically, what I'm even talking about. Suddenly, like, when you have that out of body experience and you're looking in on yourself and you go, what are you even talking about? Like, what even is Satanism? Like, who even invented that? Like, is Satan a thing? Is that a word that people understand?
So fascinating, isn't it?
It's funny, isn't it? But I think that's the thing. It's just giving yourself permission that if God is bigger than you can understand, and if you become aware that my angle on the truth is just my angle on the truth. I started reading a little bit of Jared Byas's book, Love Matters More. And he, beautifully starts that book saying different animals live in different spheres in which they're aware of their surroundings. You know, you can have a dolphin lives in the sea, and that's all it knows. It knows the sea. And you have bats that make such high-pitched noises. I can still hear bats, but a lot of adult men, they lose the ability to hear those higher noises. But that doesn't mean that those noises don't exist. So once you become aware that I'm living in this sphere, it was called an Umwelt, so it had some word, I think, in German for this kind of like this environment that animals operate in. And once you understand that your environment is limited, you know, your vision only sees to a certain point, and then you think, but that doesn't mean that that's all there is, that God exists outside of that as well, you know, outside of the sphere in which I operate and, you know, the places that I can touch and see. And other people live in different countries with completely different experiences, and not to be scared of what is outside your known world, and to think, you know, to allow yourself to expand into those spaces as well, without like fear that God is going to somehow come and go like, oh my God, you just read something on Buddhism and you're going to hell. Which, I think, you use the word permission, and I think you do need to give yourself permission for things like that, because I think sometimes until we give ourselves permission or someone gives us permission, we just stay in the same place out of fear, because that's what we've been told is safe. So, yes.
No, I mean, it's a huge deal, and it's a really hard kind of, I think it's one of the biggest initial steps is, you know, most people are exploring whether they like it or not, because they just have found gaps in their worldview, in their theology, in their Christianity, and gone, this isn't adding up, and I need to kind of start answering some of these questions I've got. But initially they don't have the permission. They're doing it almost against the will of God, and certainly against the will of their pastor or their church or the Bible or, you know, their friends, family. And yeah, there is this fear that is there. And also I don't think there's no freedom to really go for it. You know, it is maybe I'll read this book, but I mean, like, maybe if it's he's a Christian, okay, I'm kind of safe to read this book, and that's asking this question from a safe way. But there's not the freedom to go, well, actually, what if I picked up a book by a Buddhist that's asked that question? They might give me a totally different angle and perspective on this that might be very freeing and very rewarding to explore some of that. And so I think it's a bit of a you know, baby steps along the way, and we kind of come to this place of learning to trust ourselves, to have permission, to maybe believe that if there is a divine out there that is much more gracious and loving and a bit more chilled out than we thought. Those are all kind of part of the journey again, I guess.
Because if you've been told what to believe most of your life, why not, you know, what's the difference between being told what to believe and actually choosing your own beliefs in the faith that God is a better God than the God that you were given as a child, you know? It's like, I don't think God would be offended. I wouldn't be offended if someone painted a picture of me that was actually better than the real me. Why would I be offended if someone was like, oh yeah, I heard Emily on this podcast and she said this and she was really this amazing, and they totally over exaggerate how good I was or how kind I was or how loving I was or how attractive I was. I'd be like, thank you. You're like, I don't think we're going to offend God by going like, I actually don't believe in hell. I don't think God would send people to hell and God going like, oh my gosh, they said this terrible thing about me. They said that I don't burn people for, you know, for all eternity in hell for not loving me the right way. Now I'm really offended. And now maybe I'm going to, maybe I had like disinvented hell. Maybe I'm going to invent it again just for this person because they said nice things about me.
Yeah. Right. It's funny, the concept of the fact that we can be more loving than God or more gracious than God, more merciful than God, you know, all these different concepts that we have on some level that we kind of believe. Like as Christians, we ask God to heal someone, and it's like, so do you believe that you want that person to be healed more than God? But you're still calling this God a loving father, the God that is love, the God that wills that no one would suffer, and all these things, like this idea of this perfect God, perfect Christianity. And yet really this God is still sitting there going, no, I'm not healing them until Phil is really, you know,
does he mean it? Does he mean it now?
It's like, what kind of weird, horrible person is that? You know, it's a really horrible God. That he's so limited. But yeah, it's funny. We create these things and that we do, like, we it's a miracle that everyone around the world is born into the right religion. It's just amazing, isn't it? You know, we're all born into the perfect religion, and what were the odds, you know? And yet somehow you meet someone from the other side of the globe and you're like, this person's a heretic, you know, but they were born into the right religion too. Just a different one, a different part.
I remember being about 11 and going like, so this is the truth. We have the truth. But then Muslim people don't. They think they have the truth. So why is my truth better than theirs? So I've always had those questions in my head. How can you not? How can you not have those questions? Hey, what you're saying about prayer, though, I was having a conversation with Matt, with my husband this morning about it, and I got really het up about it. The whole like intervention, like providence thing. And we started talking. It was because we were talking about spiral dynamics. And I started trying to read Ken Wilber's book on the subject. And he'd said something about evolution always expands and includes. And we're like, no, it doesn't. Because, you know, that just isn't quite what evolution is. Anyway, we got into this whole argument about evolution, conversation. I'll say conversation. And so for me, like the thing was, that experience, I said to him, like, I've got some baggage with this because I've seen people who are hurting, who are begging for God to come down and to intervene and heal them. And like they need to believe in miracles. They need to believe that these magical moments can happen because they want to believe that their reality can someday be a different reality than the reality that they're currently living in. And they just want it to change, and they want to know that God loves them. So they will fast and they will beg and they will cry. That just breaks my heart because I've always just want to say, well, God's already here, you know, like, why are you're sitting in this, you know, there's a bit in my book where I'm in an all-night prayer vigil in Venezuela in a German colony on the side of a mountain. And there were strawberries growing there and there was sunlight and it was beautiful. And we arrived there and were taken straight to an all-night prayer vigil. And I'm like, people are crying out for God and they're crying out for something to change. And I said, why aren't you just outside eating strawberries? Like, God's already here. Like, why are we crying and weeping and gnashing our teeth and, you know, begging that God shows us that he loves us? And it's not that I don't believe in miracles or don't believe in like supernatural things. I tell you, I've seen some weird things in my life. It's not that I'm just like science or it has to be evidenced, but it's just this desire to say, you know, when people feel that God is visiting other people, but not them, that God is answering other people's prayers, but not theirs. And maybe they're not praying hard enough. You just want to say, just stop, just walk out of that space, look at the sky, like my poem about the walls came down. Oh, there's sky there. What's better, sky or walls? You know, what's more beautiful to look at? Yeah. So that kind of like, it pains me to remember my younger self that praying so hard, talking to God, begging God to do things as if you're trying to twist his arm, you know, rather than maybe just listening, maybe just being quiet as you're trundling around the house, tidying up or doing your weekly shop, just being in that space of listening that maybe God speaks to you through the checkout assistant, you know, or that you have a little moment of kindness with someone, or that you learn something new, or you expand your vision a little bit. And then why not call that God? Why is the only way that God speaks to us through some sort of like supernatural visitation when someone's leg grows longer than the other leg? Why would God do that and not talk to you through the checkout assistant in a supermarket?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Just, he's got a thing about legs growing, hasn't he?
It's a miracle. Yeah. God, he's really big into it.
He really likes that.
That's if God has a parlor trick, it's legs growing out. You know, if he pulls out his party trick and he goes, "All right, guys, watch this." Always a leg growing out. If in doubt. I briefly had a little talking about God's party tricks. I briefly had a little podcast thing going by myself. I didn't take it for too far because I wanted to make it a little bit more. I think I needed some help. I'm not very good with the technology. But anyway, I did it. There's one episode which is available. I think if you search for it, you might be able to find it, which was, the podcast was this Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns, same as my book. And there was an episode which was Jesus joins me for a birthday/Christmas special. So I actually had Jesus on the podcast.
And it was so good because I finally got to ask him like all of the questions that I'd asked him. And he did actually say that it's really annoying at parties because everyone's like, hey, Jesus is here. We don't need to buy the wine. We just set the water down, and he does his little party trick.
Amazing.
He said that was pretty annoying.
That gets old, I'm sure. Yeah.
It gets pretty old pretty fast. He was really rolling his eyes. Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful having that conversation with Jesus. I said some things like, some people wrote in some questions as well for the things they had to ask him. And they said, so, what music do you listen to? Who's your favorite band? And everyone thought he was going to say the Beatles. And he was like, 400 years, after I died, there was this old guy living on the side of this hillside in Albania who played the flute, and he could just do this one tune. And it was just like, because you forget, don't you, that Jesus has that much perspective. He's not just going to be talking about the Beatles.
Yeah. That's it. I love it.
But that was a good conversation to have.
I think we miss, touching on that whole concept of like how we are so fixated with, well, if we are just pray enough, we'll have revival. If we pray enough, we'll get another miracle. We'll, if someone is dying, we need to be fasting and praying in a locked closet for them to be healed, when actually sitting with them in the process of dying is maybe much more healthy and whole and beautiful, and needed. I think we miss a lot of life. That example of death. I think Christians do not engage with the concept of something like death very well. We don't engage with the concept of sickness very well. Because we're taught to overcome and run from these things. Now, I do think we should be trying to heal people if we can heal them, right? Obviously, if someone's, sick and we could take them to a doctor and get them fixed, let's do that. If we can pray for them and they're healed, great, let's do that as well. I'm not even against that. But I do think when we get to the point where we're forgoing the option to love this person, to sit with this person, to be with this person, to grieve with this person, to mourn, whatever it is. I've seen so many people very close to me and further away, from me, just talking to people on Instagram or whatever, that have lost the opportunity to be with someone in a healthy way as they died because they had to be with them in the Christian way. And now, the person is dead, right? They don't get the opportunity to do that again. That
we're trying to say all the right things and
it's really tough. I know for me, when my mother passed a couple of years ago from cancer, quite young, I think 59, so very young these days. And different members of my family engage with that very differently, but most of my family are from a kind of very charismatic, evangelical background. And so obviously people praying for healing. There was, we were quite well connected. So, you got like Bill Johnson and all the big names are all praying for her or whatever. And she died. And yet that was, for different people in my family, that was a very different experience based on, really, more than anything, the degree to which they were believing in her being miraculously healed, trusting in a prophetic word, really trying hard to pray. And that had real repercussions, based and real trauma to work through and pain and grief. And on a whole nother level than you have just generally losing a loved one is a very hard process to go through. But I often think about my mom as well. And I'm like, gosh, I think she was a very evangelical Christian as well. So she probably wanted that in her worldview, but I don't know if that's what she needed. I think having someone sit with her, having read and studied about the process of people dying. I've studied a lot over the last few years and read different books from people that work in hospices or maybe spiritual people. Ram Dass's book on death is absolutely stunning. But reading these books of wow, there is a way to help someone die really well. And that's a really absurd saying for a Christian, to die well, because to die is this, we lose. Now, in another sense, we win, and therefore we don't even have to acknowledge it because, they're gone. I think of my dad, and, he was the morning of my mother's death who called people and be like, hey, great news. My wife's in glory, and he's not even engaging with the pain of loss of a wife because you're not allowed to. You're supposed to be happy about this. Yeah. And it's a really weird dynamic. So I think there's just so many components that we have in our faith of we're praying and miracles and things like that they cause us to escape reality. And maybe in some level they are escape mechanisms. I don't know. It's
I think a lot of it is about, fear of death. You know, if you look into a lot of philosophy, and if you go, so much of it is like, we are animals. What sets us apart as animals is we're aware that we're going to die. We're aware of that. You know, we could happily be in the moment if, you know, the moment was all there was, but we're aware that we're going to die. And that is traumatic. You know, I've lived with, you know, trauma as people would, you know, would classify trauma, but actually just to be, that's a unit, to be traumatized is a universal experience, I think, because we're aware of our death. We're aware that our loved ones are going to die. And to get to a point where you make deep peace with that, honestly, it's not easy. It's just not easy. So I do think, you know, that you know, as Christians, it's very easy to find these little mechanisms that help us put off actually facing that question and actually dealing with that question. Though you would think, for me, in grief and in those things, I think community is one of the most important things. And knowing that all of those people loved your mum, and all of those people were willing to stop what they were doing and to hold her in their prayers and in their thoughts, was a community coming around, and was a deep expression of love. And, you know, if that was something that, you know, people were able to tune into, saying, you know, yes, these prayers, but these were the prayers just there to work or not to work? Or were the prayers there as a display of just deep love and care, and actually not wanting to lose your mum, and actually wanting to say, God, we don't want to lose Phil's mum. You know, we want her with us. And that's, if you look at it from that angle, that's just a deep, beautiful expression
it's a very beautiful thing
of love, but also very difficult when you're actually believing that God loves you in, you know, and God is going to show that love by your mum not dying. And then obviously that's really hard. That's really hard.
No, absolutely. And it obviously does. And these mechanisms work for a huge amount of people, right? A lot of people go through these things and don't end up walking away with huge trauma, right? I mean, I just had an expert on trauma on my podcast last week, and he's talking about, you know, hell. And that's a common theology that people point to is, oh, this is religious traumatic, theology that causes people to be traumatized. And he says, no, it's not particularly. He says,
not everyone.
Our response to the theology of hell is what's traumatic, because some of us have a terrifying, horrifying response, and we don't get to pacify it and to come to some sort of resolution. The people that do manage to do that don't seem to be traumatized by hell. But it's actually those that have that. Do you think that's not just a thing of belief, though? Like, if you truly, truly believed in hell, I don't think I got to the point of ever truly believing that. So I don't feel traumatized by the idea of hell. But if you were to truly believe it, if you witness a car accident, and, you know, and you can't do anything, you're caught in that freeze response, that, you know, that's trauma, because that moment keeps being relived because you weren't able to do anything. And if you're thinking that all of your non-Christian friends, or all of your Christian friends that weren't good enough Christians, that they're going to hell, and actually, even if you pray with all of your strength, it still wasn't enough. You're observing that kind of accident, that ongoing accident happening. It's that, I'll have to listen to the episode, but for me, like, if you really believe that, like, gosh, that's just traumatizing on this whole level, because it's not just a quick death, it's this permanent punishment, isn't it? It's massive. Yeah, I mean, it's all about the resolution component, isn't it? I mean, you've got this huge response that fires up in your body, and if it isn't pacified, if it isn't kind of brought to a resolution, that's the birth of trauma. And yeah, I guess it probably is resolved in different ways by different people. Some people probably go, wait a minute, that seems ridiculous. I don't believe that. Even if it's on a very low conscious level, maybe we're not even thinking that through as much, but just that we're kind of subconsciously going, I don't really believe that. Like, let's keep moving on. Or maybe we have other ways of engagement. Maybe we believe it on such a huge level that we go, oh yeah, but obviously I'm safe, or I'm good, and my family are safe, and maybe everyone we kind of love is fine. So we're kind of like, oh, it didn't really traumatize me, because everyone I know, because I live in this tiny little Christian bubble and I'm not allowed outside of it, doesn't really traumatize me, because I don't really mind if the greengrocer down the street goes to hell, because I don't really know him. Because we go to the Christian greengrocer that way. I don't know. But you know, there's probably different ways that people engage with it, but it is so fascinating how our theology can pacify and can be actually a response to trauma that actually works. Or it can actually, the same theology can actually be the thing that causes trauma and gets us stuck in these kind of loops that we can't close.
So you try your fear of death, you help it evaporate by believing in heaven that you have a ticket to, but then but that brings in this whole possibility of hell. So in like trying to tackle your fear of death, you end up in some ways just making it worse.
Yeah. Or maybe you're fine for now, but then 10 years from now, when you start to question a completely separate theology, you start to go, wait, but if I do that, then I'll believe in hell. Then I'll be going to hell. And so then this theology that you built to pacify yourself 10 years down the line comes up and goes, hi, I'm here to traumatize you.
Which I've heard a lot of.
It's fascinating.
People who, again, inverted commas, deconstruct things. And then way down the line, I've got one friend she's like, occasionally I just think I've got like 4 kids. What if they're going to hell and it's my fault? That thought will just come from nowhere, where, she's not given it space, because you've got that kind of foundation. So it's all about like refusing synapses in healthier, directions, isn't it? And doing that work in which we can, I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? So what's it like?
It's so understandable though.
Living in this space and having these conversations with people all of the time. Do you get upset? Do you sleep?
I don't. I love this because I love helping people process this and get through it. I'm probably a bit of a weird component, like as far as humanity goes. My makeup is just this weird mix that I'm not too fussed about a lot of things, and I don't engage with things on certain levels that maybe other people spend their whole lives engaging with things on that level. I don't know. But I love it. I love asking questions. I love uncertainty. I love exploring. I love helping people and kind of not giving them the certainty they need, but kind of slowly eking them out into a bit more uncertainty and kind of holding their hand, making them know it's safe. I love the whole process, but, I've never really had the traumatic response to, oh my gosh, I might be wrong and I might go to hell. 'Cause the way I've engaged with that forever is like, God, if there is really a hell and there's a God that would send people there, I want to be anywhere that God isn't. Fuck that guy. That has been my kind of response. That might be a very logical, rational, disconnected from my emotions kind of response. And maybe if I actually get deep enough, I'll be suddenly traumatized and terrified. I don't know. But on the whole, I've never, maybe, and then maybe hell never traumatized me. Maybe it wasn't a thing that got me on that level, right?
Maybe you're just not quite bad enough. Maybe you're just like lukewarm.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've always been a bit
bad.
lukewarm.
You see, you
get spat out. That's the worst. Better to be cold.
Yeah, it's better to be really, really bad.
Yeah, I think this part as well, though, and I don't know if you've experienced this as someone that's questioned a lot and always been someone that asks a lot of questions. There's a component as well of like you get used to kind of, well, what if I'm wrong? Okay, yeah, I've had that thought 1,000 times so far. Like I think it becomes a bit like, oh, that's not actually a new or terrifying concept. I'm always wondering if I'm wrong, and I'm always kind of going, that's always been the case. I could have been wrong. Or when you change your mind so often, you're like, I've got to the point where God must be pretty much at peace with me being wrong, because I've had 110 opinions so far, and so far 109 of them certainly were wrong. And this one, I'm not that sure I'm right, but I think it's more right than the last 109.
So are all your
beliefs pretty chill?
Are all your beliefs kind of these borrowed jackets then that you're just like trying on for size and fit?
Constantly. Or going back to try another one on, stitch them together.
Do you think that you actually have like a favorite jacket that you're just secretly clinging on to, and actually like, no, like all of the other jackets are just you trying them on, and this is your belief that you're going to stick to?
I think we all have things that feel more comfortable. I think there's certain language or certain like makeups that work with our culture, our socially constructed personalities and makeups, all these different things, our family backgrounds, our background in faith. There's certain things that probably predispose us towards something or away from something. And so, yeah, I think there's certain things that I find particularly beautiful. I do find certain teachers, someone like Alan Watts or Ram Dass, I'm like, oh, there's something about this. I like that. There's, maybe experiments with psychedelics, taking some mushrooms and going, wow, okay, that lines up more with this kind of like world than that. And that makes me open up to this much more than open to something like that. And so different experiences or different backgrounds will, I think, it's natural that we're going to gravitate towards certain jackets, right? And that's kind of what I was prodding at there, where I was like, when you're in the process of like
trying
to explore a new way of believing and a new ideas, and what will this new faith be that I'm constructing, building, creating creatively, how much of that is, I've got these 10 other jackets I've tried on, and maybe if I stitch the left arm and the right arm in that pocket onto this new thing I found, maybe it'll be right. You know, of course we're going to do that, right? Because we like the left arm and the right arm in that pocket. I don't like the rest of it, but I really like those parts, right? And maybe after I've gone through 100 other jackets, you go, actually, I kind of like the zip on that jacket back there. I'm going to go back and get that as well. You know, it's natural that we kind of bounce around, I think. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with kind of figuring it out as we go.
And that's the way you explain that, you know, it's creative, isn't it? I like this stylistically. This is a good fit. I'm going to borrow this from there. To allow yourself to have a relationship with something other than yourself in a creative way that involves movement and dance and change and growth. Such a beautiful thing. And I do think I like to listen to you and imagine, you know, my one of my past selves listening to you being, yeah, but the truth, he's talking about loads of jackets here, but the truth is absolute. The truth has to be absolute. It's just what it is. You can't chop and change it. He's talking about chopping and changing, literally talking about chopping and changing the truth. Yeah. Oh, bless him. What a shame. You know, he was so used by God at one point, and now he's just chopping and changing.
I know.
It's heartbreaking. But isn't that a beautiful thing? But if you look at that kind of logically, you're going to think, to have someone sat in a congregation, nodding their head, doing what they're told, trying really hard to believe the things that the pastor's telling them to believe, failing a lot at it, trying to bury their depression because they think that no one in the church is going to want to see their depression, and actually just trying to say the right things and trying to live the right life. If you were God, you know, to engage with that person would be like, hey, you know, I'm a real person here. Like, this isn't just like some sort of I don't know, some sort of a business club where you have to put on certain manners and do things in certain ways. As soon as like, I'm such a creative, I'm like, everything's creative. Like my art, I love teaching people how to paint. I love learning how to write. I love kind of like yesterday, what I did was I love, at the moment, trying to cut out plastic and trying to, you know, to think like that. You're talking about like spiral dynamics. I'm like, very much in the phase of like, like, I can't buy new clothes. I have to buy everything secondhand.
Yeah.
And all the bits of wax from old candles, I can't throw them away because it's still wax. And I was like, what do I do? So I had this jar of like pieces of wax. Then I put all the pieces of wax in a jam jar. Then I had these little stick candles, and I put the stick candle in the middle and lit it. And as it went down, it like burnt all of the wax. And I'm like,
nice.
This is life changing. And
that must have been some smell, the mix of all those different waxes.
All the different wax. I put in some essential oil. I was watching it like, what's going to happen? Is it all going to burn? Is the glass going to break? But isn't that kind of just approach to just questioning every element of kind of like life? Like, is there a better way to make a cup of tea? There must be, because I'm not that good at it.
Yeah,
you know, like,
I'll get my wife to do it properly.
How can we embrace life fully and ask interesting questions and try doing things in new ways? Try approaching faith in new ways. Try approaching God in new ways. Like showing some interest, sitting in a pew every Sunday and yawning a lot. Like finding ways to actually be interested in theology, in some sort of some being that's outside of yourself or inside of yourself, and engaging with it and playing playfully, creatively. Like fun. Isn't fun a good word?
Yeah.
People, you know, when you're talking to people, I think I've listened to a couple of your episodes. The one with the lady who'd been a pastor who became a stripper. That was great.
Oh gosh,
And there's that element of let's just have some fun with this. Let's laugh. When I went through like deep grief and loss and trauma, I like formed a comedy duo and went on tour with John Cooper Clarke. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Oh, he's like a punk poet from Manchester. He's bit of a British celebrity. So that was like my response to like grief and to trauma, was to do something completely like random, but at least I was doing something that made me feel like this is my authentic response. It is a weird response. It is an abnormal response, but it is my response to grief is to process it by going on tour with famous poet people and having a real laugh with my friend. And like giving myself permission for that, thinking this is my journey. No one else is on this journey. This is how I choose to embrace what's happening to me. And it's like when with pain, and I think Glennon Doyle helped me quite a bit with that, was like pain is a traveling professor. It's not a hot potato. So talking about the pain of leaving a church or leaving a community or leaving a marriage because you got deconstruction, all of these things that happen. It's like, if that pain is just going to be wasted, that breaks my heart. And I mean by wasted, by not listened to. So when someone has died or the path that you were on has been disrupted, to then say to that pain, okay, I'm here and I'm listening. I'm not going to push you away any sooner than I need to. And I'm going to stay open. So my thing was staying open, not putting up kind of walls. Yes, boundaries when it comes to people. Boundaries are so important, aren't they? But like we can just harden ourselves against the world and pretend we're not in pain. And it's best just to admit that you're in pain and to stay open to it all.
Yeah, gosh, absolutely.
Talking about, that journey that life's taken me on so far of like all of these spanners thrown into the works. I was thinking about evolution, like how many things happened, to humans and to animals as we've been evolving that have suddenly like, oh no, it's a volcano, the dinosaurs have gone, or it's a meteor, it's like, oh, there's pollution in London, all the moths aren't matching on the trees, like all of these things that happen, and then the stuff that happen, all the change that happens in response to it. But it needs a degree of openness, because the saddest thing is to be clinging to that faith that's already died, or clinging to that relationship that's already died, and just going, no, this was all I had, this was the only option, and now it's gone, and just having that lifelong scream of like, no, and that's like, I think there is some of that happens, isn't there, when people's faith gets upturned, and maybe it needs to, but for it to be that ongoing pain for the rest of life, just being the pain of just thinking that there isn't a new path after the old path has come to an abrupt end is
yeah, absolutely. No, it's not a fun journey if you aren't able to kind of adapt to become a bit more flexible and a bit more open to the uncertainty of it. Like you talk about evolution there, and at the end of the day, the animals that are completely inflexible and black and white in how they function, and they have very little, variety or whatever, they don't survive very well when a big catastrophic kind of scenario or even a minor change happens, and all the moths died, so that was our food. So what do? Oh, we're dying. Oh, great. Good call. Or look at pandas, right? Like pandas, right? I mean, we are fighting against evolution to keep pandas alive because pandas have made a choice to die, and they made a choice to die a while back. And there's other components in there, but it's like, guys, eat something different, right? At a certain point, you got to mix it up.
You say fight against evolution. How much is that evolution, or is that just asshole humans who like don't care about numbers?
Yeah, well, and if you can remove that component of believing humans are so far removed from other animals that we're some sort of better
outside
than, and we should be, but we're the dick animal that ruined everything for other animals. But guess what? If you're not willing to try another food, you're gonna die. So, and then we're left with a few altruistic
I'm gonna say that to my kids when they don't eat my cooking.
There you go. Exactly. You don't like these veggies.
You're gonna die.
Right. You've got a couple quid pocket money. You can try and live off that. You can get some food for that. It's not going to be good. Or you die. There you go. How'd you like that?
That does actually
Child services might knock on the door pretty quickly.
It does actually sound like my parenting, though. Very much so. Like.
Well, and hopefully we are evolving beyond that kind of evolution model, maybe. But I just think in that concept of, this inflexibility, if you go, oh, there's no longer, this type of food and that's the only type of food I eat. Oh, well, will I try other food or shall I die? And what's funny is it does feel like a lot of the church is going, oh, everyone's leaving because they don't like the fact that we hate gay people, or that we are so rigid we can't possibly, get along with Muslims living in the same town, or whatever it is. And they left with this question of going, okay, can I open up myself up to read the Bible where I might be affirming of a gay person? Can I open myself up to be a little bit less intolerant of my neighbor? No. Okay, well, guess what? Your church is going to be dead in 20 years. It's not going to be there. 50 years, that whole movement will be dead. Or we could maybe start to look at how else we could read the Bible. And it does feel like in a lot of branches of Christianity are facing these very real realities right now, in the West.
Somewhere we heard about this idea of like the next 5%, like you can only change your beliefs 5% at a time. You're not suddenly going to go from one day to the next, like, I'm racist, and the next day, oh, I'm not a racist, because it's not how things happen. But understanding that about ourselves, and we were even talking about like, oh, do we create an app? What do we do that help people connect people to their next 5%? What's the area? Yeah, what's the area that I have a blind spot in that I'm not aware yet that it's a blind spot? Because if I look back at my life, there were loads of things that I believed, or loads of things that I did, and I thought I was doing it the best way. Then I realized it wasn't the best way. So what's the current one? How do I actively look for it?
That would be genius. An app that if you could like line up just even things like you sit down with someone that is, implicitly racist, maybe not explicitly, they would not like the idea of thinking they were racist, but they are not able to embrace the fact that they are deeply, implicitly, systemically racist. But sitting down with them going, you're racist, blah, 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 does not go anywhere well, right? They just shut down, they walk away. But if you could be somehow looking at different people and mapping out the journeys they need to go on, you need to go from being implicitly racist to completely anti-racist. But then it's like, okay, without me saying you need to become anti-racist, you're a racist, whatever. What's the 5%? What's the little thing that you would accept today that would start you on that journey that if we keep moving 2 years from now, you'd be full blown really going for anti-racist, passionate about that movement and seeing humanity change for the better in that area. But you wouldn't have ever wanted to go there, because that was, I don't know, evil or whatever. I don't know, different people have different ideas about different concepts, but how amazing would it be to the church always talks about the slippery slope, right? And that's what that 5% is, right? It's like, oh, look at that. Oh God. Oh, this is going down. Oh, just 5% degrees. Interesting. That's what we're talking about on some level.
Not even a slippery slope. It's just a very gentle incline.
Very gentle. I'm enjoying this stroll. It's got a little easier. Oh, it's nice. It's nice. Oh, am I going downhill? And you look back and you've come down a mountain, but you were very gradual.
Exactly. There is an author who wrote a book called Microshifts, and I was speaking to him recently, and he was talking about those little steps that you would take. Maybe speak to someone on your way to work that you don't normally speak to, or you've got 2 minutes a day. What can you do with those 2 minutes that just helps you along that, eases you slowly along that journey? And I think, isn't that a great point? Because so often we're talking about doing the big things. I tried to do the big things. I tried to leave my life and go off to South America for 5 years. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, what if we slowly just change the small things? Like when I was a bit overweight a few years ago, and I thought, oh, I could diet. There's all these different diets out there. I really don't believe in dieting, but it's just slowly just being like, do you know what? I do not need to be eating sugar. I'm just going to slowly just change the things that I can make that change that actually affects my whole life, but is just really gentle and is really kind of slow and kind. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, don't we? Like, you need to find out what's true and do the thing and change the world and stop doing this and stop doing that. But maybe it's just honestly, I think a lot of it comes down to self-love. Understand. So we're trying to do a little project, me and my husband at the moment, called Project Me. We just started it slowly on Instagram. And it's this idea that by knowing ourselves more, we can therefore love ourselves more effectively. So if I am 7 and there's this, girl I like in primary school, and I'm like, I really like this girl, I'm going to buy her some chocolate because everyone loves chocolate, and I buy her chocolate, and actually she's lactose intolerant. How do you love people in a way in which they can receive that love? It's under, you've got the love languages and people who receive things through physical touch, through gifts, all those different ways. And if we don't know someone's love language, how do we love them in a way that love is actually an attractive thing for them, or an actually a helpful thing? And then I started thinking, like, well, what about ourselves? So I say that I love myself and that I'm doing self-care, but my self-care is mostly watching television, when actually that just makes me depressed, or my self-care is having some time for having a drink, and actually that makes me anxious. So maybe it's thinking, when do I come alive? Oh, it's when I'm outdoors and when I'm having a walk in nature. Like, that is something that afterwards that makes me feel good. So it's doing this little self-curious thing. I think self-curiosity is so important. Yeah. When you look at yourself with some self-curiosity and think, this is what you like, this is what is helpful, this is what isn't, this is your background, this is where you came from. How can we love ourselves effectively in a way in which we can actually receive that love? And obviously, like, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But if you're not loving yourself, then honestly, just try and start doing stuff for your neighbor when you don't even know how to love yourself effectively. That's just hard. Obviously, I don't think, if we thought, until I love myself effectively, I'm never going to do anything kind for anyone else ever. The world's probably not going to never do it. No one's ever going to do anything. I'm not like saying that, but I am saying, like, when it comes to curiosity, I just think, self-curiosity, questioning your motives, questioning your beliefs, analyzing things, and being kind to yourself, can lead to an increase in your ability to love yourself effectively. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, sometimes it's absolutely. Like when you pull apart this whole belief system, what do you replace it with? What do you replace it with? Now am I just going to, I don't go to church, I just watch TV. What's the healthiest way that you can live? What's the most loving way that you can live? Yeah. What's, the kindest way that you can operate in the world, and including yourself in that kindness? Because it's hard, isn't it? It is hard when you throw something away, and then like you said earlier, like, you just will have the tendency to think, maybe I'll become a Muslim if that's true. I'll just replace kind of my blueness with another blueness, a different shade of blue. Absolutely. And it's really tempting to want to do that, but it's how do you live in this space which isn't, doesn't have quite so many walls and does have more questions? I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to figure it out. Let me know if you do.
Well, yeah, don't expect an email anytime soon. It's such a messy, complex thing. That sounds like a beautiful project, because I think we've always been doing this. At the end of the day, any of this is all based on our, at some point going, do I think this is the best thing, the right thing, the right belief, whatever, on some level, even if we're giving that over to a pastor or to a church group or to the Bible or to a God, on some level, at some point we buy in, and we're trusting our ability to go, yeah, I'm in. And I think what's interesting is, as we lose an authority figure, the pastor, the church, the God, the Bible, whatever it is, there's this terror of going, oh, I can't just trust me. And I think a lot of that is because the church teaches you that you can't trust yourself, right? Because you're the sinful, deeply problematic person, especially if you're walking away from God. But I think learning to realize, well, I've been doing this all along on some level, and actually I need to learn how to trust myself and to make decisions and to understand, what do I like and what am I about and who am I and what are my desires, what are my hopes and dreams and all these different things. That's a fundamental bedrock of being a healthy human being. I think, if you can't be doing that, like you said, you will, I fully believe you can go serve food at a soup kitchen or something if you're a broken person. Don't by any means, stop helping people or cut off the opportunity or intentionally be like, well, I'm not going to love that person, because I'm not able to love myself yet. I'm going to intentionally be a dick. No, do your best, see what you got.
I like your disclaimers. And quite often it's the other way around, isn't it? Because it's kind of thinking, like,
it could teach us that, yeah.
I think sometimes we can get in a real rut and we can go off, I think a great thing to do is to go off to a soup kitchen. And honestly, I love, like, this idea. I think Pete Rowlands talks about it a little bit, of it's not going into evangelize, but to be evangelized to.
Yes.
So you go into those spaces and it's like, what are these people revealing about me? And you realize, oh, the Bible talks about that. Like, Jesus is that person. Jesus is that person to me. It's not about me helping the guy in the soup kitchen. The guy in the soup kitchen is Jesus, who then just kind of wildly ministered to me somehow. Yeah. It's all backwards and upside down. And that's kind of great, isn't it?
It's beautiful. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. Oh, Evelyn, this has been amazing. Absolutely fantastic.
We'll be friends now.
Oh, 100%. I'm looking forward to COVID being over and we can hang out. But yes, we should do this again for sure. And
it's a lovely drive, like from Manchester, like across the Peak District. Come visit. You've got kids, right?
No, I don't. No, not yet. So,
well, you can come and borrow mine.
In Bliss. So, well, my wife might like that.
I've got a really nice dog, if you like dogs.
Okay, there you go. See, I'm a big fan of dogs. So,
oh, yeah, she's pretty great.
I'm a big fan of kids as well. Kids are great. Anything above the age of kind of 3, once they're talking, that's when I can start really corrupting them. Teaching them to break the rules, do whatever their parents are trying to get them to not do. Those kind of things. I'm not a good influence on kids.
Be really great. Because I hope we get this vaccine sorted and we can all start meeting up in real life.
For real.
I'd love to meet my husband as well, because that's been another fun story. We've been together like a year, since yesterday, like exactly a year.
Wow.
We've been married for how many months? Some months, we don't know. We're not very good with numbers. But
this is 2020, right? I mean, it's just like, I don't know. Could be a year, could be 4 days, somewhere in that window.
I'll tell you the story really quickly because it fits with how funny and quirky my life and book is. So I was wild camping on a hillside with my kids, and I'd lent my tent to an Australian visitor friend who had forgotten to replace the fly sheet. So I had to call her and say, Indigo, please turn up with the fly sheet. We're on this hillside. I'm like, how's she going to find us? We're on this random bush on a random hillside. So I walked back down the footpath and there was a van parked there. And I knocked on the window of the van and I said, hey, if you see an Australian walking past looking lost with a fly sheet, could you point her down this path, please? And pointed in the direction I'd come from. And I made friends with the people who were travelers from Cornwall who were in the van. She was a professional mermaid, makes mermaid tails and is a most wonderful mermaid. I had her swimming in the pond behind my house in her mermaid tail and no one even batted an eyelid. It was weird. And her partner, he does a lot of work in like TV shows. He was in like Poldark in Cornwall and stuff like that. And he's also works with an armourer to the Queen. He was off fittings of some suit of armour for Matt Damon not long ago because he's the same body size as Matt Damon. Anyway, so I made these fun friends through that experience who lived in the van. And I said, hey, if you want to come back for a meal, because travelling is, it's tough if you want to use my kitchen a bit. So they stopped by and we had an evening with them and they were really great. Then every year they'd visit again and then they'd start to stay for a week and then they'd stay for a couple of months and then they'd stay a bit longer. And then they had a stuffed ibex in their bed. So they couldn't fit in their bed because they sell antiques and they were selling antiques. So they ended up in my caravan because their van was full of these stuffed animals, which then ended up in my garage. Oh, it's a long story. But then, so my husband, who I'm with now, I knew that I think I'd met him a few times in real life, but couldn't really remember him. But we've been in touch in a similar way, to us having these conversations about similar subjects online. And so I knew that he'd had a van. So when they were after buying a new van, I said, do you know anyone who's selling a van? And he didn't. And then later on, they bought this new van and it was weird. It was a Peugeot Tabet that looked like a caravan with like a steering wheel in it. It didn't even have a door to get in. You'd have to climb in the side of the caravan and walk to the front and then drive it. It was like this kind of box. It was so weird. And I sent Matt a picture of this and I said, you've got to come and check this out. This is going to get delivered to my house. And he went, ha, 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 that's horrendous. I want one. And I said, oh, that's such a good response when you have this vehicle that's so ugly, but there's something about it that you kind of want it. So he showed up at my house to see this van and to meet these people. And that was just over a year ago. And then he never left. And then we got married at the beginning of lockdown. And I had a dream the night before we got married in which COVID was hitting and we had to move the wedding forward. I just threw on whatever clothes I could find. We couldn't find a ring. So one of us used a bit of string and then we got married. And then that day we were messaging the vicar and we said to her, what are you doing today? And she was like, well, I'm free at 5. And we realized that COVID was about to hit and lockdown was about to hit. So we moved the wedding forward. Matt didn't have a ring. So we just used one of my old rings and I just had 2 hours to get ready, threw on some clothes. ran down the hill to the church, called all of our friends, and everyone who could show up with 2 hours notice showed up, and it was all ramshackled and brilliant and completely in the style of, how I tend to do life. So lockdown for us has been nice. We live in a house that I've recently discovered it's an old bone crushing mill. Oh, so wow. There would have been a water wheel outside the house, probably crushing animal bones for fertilizers, maybe some human bones as well. So that's where I found myself now in life. So you'll have to come and visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if we're not able to properly visit, maybe we'll go for a walk in the peaks or something at some point.
Yes, that would be lovely. And if you come at 6:30 every evening, we live in Belper, and they invented the Belper Moo. It went international. Okay. So at 6:30, instead of clapping the NHS, I think we were doing that as well, but everyone just started mooing to relieve stress and anxiety from lockdown. So everyone's leaning over their garden fences with trumpets and bits of hose pipe and just making cow noises. But I think that's really funny because it's like we're kind of barnyard animals in lockdown.
Yeah, it feels like it.
I painted a large cow out of an old door, did a big rainbow above it, and that actually it was actually printed in the big issue.
Nice.
The Belper.
Wow. Amazing. Honestly, Emily, you're one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. I love it. You're someone that's lived a life richly, but not only that, you can tell the story. I think there's a real knack to telling stories.
I think you've got to have fun. I think you've just got to have fun.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I think really God, beautiful. Whoever she is, just wants us to have some fun.
Yeah.
I think it's allowed. Good, healthy, loving fun when no one gets hurt.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that is something that people have taken away from this, for sure. If people are watching this, listening to this and going, God, love this one. Amazing. How can they connect with you, track with you? I mean, I know you've got some upcoming projects. You've got your book, which they should obviously pick up. Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns.
Yeah, Hitchhiking with Drunken Nuns. That's available in the UK via Proust. We can ship to the US, but I need to find a way to get it. I need a publisher over there as well at some point, and I'll be getting that sorted. On Instagram, I'm Emily John Garcés because I didn't want to change my last name when I got married. So me and my husband, we just decided to swap middle names.
Wow, I like that. That's cool.
Can I tell them your middle name? Yeah, so he's now Matthew Laura.
I love it.
So it's awesome. Emily John Garcés and Matthew Laura Aitken. I don't think we've actually said that publicly before, so I've just outed him. But I think it's cool. It's a romantic gesture, isn't it? To actually
I love that.
Swap middle names. So that's me on Instagram.
Maybe I'll catch on.
Yes, I sell lots of art. I'm on Etsy and all of those places.
Cool.
If you put Emily Garcés into Google, I'll pop up somewhere.
I'll chuck some links in the show notes. So I'll maybe touch base with you before this comes out. To be honest with you, this is going to come out in like 3 days.
Cool.
Because I go through these stages of filming like a whole bunch of podcasts, and then I have like a month of like not filming them because I need to record usually about like 10 a month, and they're 2 to 3 hour conversations. So it's just like, it's a lot if you're doing them all the time every week. And so I usually do like a batch, a whole bunch. And you are like on, like the beginning of a whole new recording cycle. And I've basically run out of, new episodes. So you're like a very quick turnaround. Sometimes people are a month after I record, but I think
I like it when you're just like, let's just do this straight away. Because honestly, if I'd booked this in 3 months, I would have forgotten.
Exactly.
5 years in South America does that to a girl. It's just like now, or it's just not going to happen. Like
That's how I operate in life.
Time is an illusion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I absolutely love this conversation, and I really hope that people plug into maybe what you're doing, your future products, your book. Hopefully we can get you a US publisher, because a lot of my guys are from the US, a lot of folks that are following me. But they can do that via your current.
I've got loads of ventures coming up. I'm talking with my friend Maggie Rowe in LA, and we're talking about some possible podcast ideas. And
wonderful.
Yeah, check out her book as well, Sin Bravely. Very exciting.
You mentioned
book
that
about religious scrupulosity and honestly and comedy as well. She's someone else who loves to laugh.
I love it.
So yeah, watch this.
If you're not laughing, like, my God, I can't even imagine this journey without some laughter. You know what I mean? Everything is funny to me. Even the ups, the downs, it's all going to be turned into a joke with me, much to the chagrin of evereverone around me. But I just can't imagine not laughing my way through this.
I don't think there's anything too dark. I think laughter is, is best response. There's a lot of that in my book as well. Like, if
Wonderful.
you don't like inappropriate laughter at things that most people don't laugh at, then just don't buy it. Really
well, I'm going to pick up a copy of your book after this because, like we said, I wanted to do it between the Friday, Monday window of us arranging this, but I never got around to it. But I'm going to be, after this conversation, I'm like, oh God, I want to hear all the other stories that I've missed here because I'm sure there's a lot that we didn't go into.
Yeah, I honestly did
just
swim
your
across the
introduction.
swim across the eye of a volcano in Bolivia with an indigenous
Whilst kidnapping a small child. Yeah.
That I accidentally kidnapped. I really did do that. I apologize, but it happened.
Oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of white saviorism or something in there to be joked about, but
yeah,
I love it.
No more
Wonderful.
jokes. It's very serious.
Thank you for coming on, Emily. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to getting to know you more over the coming years. But I'll let you know when this comes out, and yeah, people watching, listening, do make sure you're following Emily on Instagram and buy all her stuff on Etsy and get a copy of her book and stuff. I
think there'll be a special sticker. It might be an imaginary special sticker for anyone who actually listens to the full length of this, right?
If anyone listens through to this, you need to message in, post and I'll an Instagram story and tag us both, and we'll
I'll post you an imaginary sticker. Promise.
There you go. I'll give you a thumbs up.
Yeah. There you go. That's exciting.
Man, if people, yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I'll give you a double thumbs up. I'll maybe even share the story on Instagram. But yeah, we're promising high things here.
I know. Yeah. I'm not promising anything I can't deliver.
That's it. That's a very good lesson in life to not do that.
It was really lovely, talking to you, especially because you're someone who's, put yourself in this space of opening up a platform for conversation, because what I went through would have been easier, would have been less painful if I'd gone through it with other people. Yeah. It would have been. And so it's just a beautiful thing to create a community. I don't believe in safe spaces. I believe in brave spaces. And so I think that was a Hillary McBride thing. I think she'd said that once. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do, to acknowledge the bravery that it takes for people to come into these spaces and to have these conversations. So thank you for everyone who's watched and listened. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Big time. Yeah. Well, and thank you for being so vulnerable, opening up, sharing your story. And I'm sure many people have resonated with it and appreciate that. So, yeah. Yeah.
Get in touch. I'm always happy to chat. Sometimes I put podcasts out there and people are like, I didn't want to message you because I thought there'd just be a total deluge in messages. And I'm like, no, you're the first one. Please don't go and leave me. I thought you were talking to me.
You won't get a deluge from my audience. You'll get 3 or 4 messages if you're lucky. So,
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So you be the 1 or 2 people that message Emily, please. If you got this far, send her a message. We need all the encouragement we can get out here.
And I always have space for more friends. You ever have people who have a friends quota and they've got 5 friends and they don't want any more? Honestly, I've only got 5 friends and I do want more. So
I love it. I absolutely love it. That's amazing. All right. Well, have a good one. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a good chunk of time as well. And so I appreciate you giving so much of your day to chat.
No, it's been good. Yeah. Honestly, I don't really want to do anything else with life. I think having these conversations is just what I want to do. Can't think of anything better. I could go and I'm going to go and wash the dishes now, and I'm sure that will be equally exciting, but maybe not. So
maybe. Well, you've got to, you've got to have that mentality, right? You could be on the beach in Spain. So
exactly. Thank you.
All right. Love you, Emily. Catch you later. Yeah. Let's see. Bye.
Take care.